The sound of my son's hand striking his mother's face was louder than the thunder rattling the windows outside. At our Thanksgiving dinner table, amidst the crystal glasses and roasted turkey, my son Marcus slapped my wife Beatrice so hard she fell to the floor. And the worst part was not the violence itself, it was what happened next. His wife Tiffany did not gasp, she did not scream, she clapped. She actually clapped her hands and laughed, saying he was finally teaching that old woman her place. I did not yell, I did not fight back with fists. I simply stood up, adjusted my tie, and made one phone call that would turn their lavish lives into a living hell within 15 minutes. When the doorknob finally turned, the look of sheer terror on my son's face told me he knew his reign of terror was over. Before I tell you how I dismantled my son's life piece by piece, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know how far this story of justice has traveled. My name is Isaiah Jefferson. Most people in this gated community in Atlanta know me as Ike, the quiet old man who walks with a cane and drives a 10-year-old Ford truck. They see a 73-year-old retired steelworker, a man with calloused hands and a slow gait. They see my wife Beatrice, who has been in a wheelchair since her stroke last year, and they look at us with pity. They think we are lucky to be living in the guest suite of this multi-million-dollar mansion owned by our successful son, Marcus. They have no idea that Marcus does not own a single brick of this house. They have no idea that the luxury cars in the driveway, the designer clothes on his wife's back, and the food on this table are all paid for by the sweat of my 40 years in the steel mills and the investments I made when no one was watching. I let Marcus play the part of the big shot CEO because I wanted him to feel proud. I wanted him to have the dignity I had to fight for. But tonight, at this dinner table, I realized I had not raised a king. I had raised a monster. It was Thanksgiving, a day that is supposed to be about gratitude and family. The dining room was decorated like something out of a magazine. Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, had insisted on a black tie theme. She sat at the head of the table, shimmering in a silver dress that probably cost more than my first car. She is 30 years old, a former model who has never worked a day since she met my son. She looked at the spread of food with a wrinkled nose as if she smelled something rotting. On the table, among the catered dishes of lobster bisque and truffled mashed potatoes, sat a simple ceramic bowl. Inside were my wife Beatrice's collard greens. She had spent all morning making them, her good hand trembling as she seasoned the pot with smoked turkey necks and spices just the way her grandmother taught her. It was the only thing she could contribute, the only piece of her soul she could put on this table. Tiffany picked up a serving spoon, lifted some of the greens, and let them plop back into the bowl with a look of absolute disgust. "Can we please get this ghetto trash off my table?" she said, her voice loud and sharp. "It smells like poverty. It smells like slave food." The room went silent. I looked at Marcus, my son, the boy I taught to fish, the man whose college tuition I paid for by working double shifts in the furnace heat. I waited for him to defend his mother. I waited for him to tell his wife that she was eating the food of our ancestors' food that represented survival and love. Instead, Marcus chuckled. He took a sip of his wine and smirked. "Come on, Tiff, be nice," he said, but his tone was mocking. "You know Mom likes her soul food. Just put it on the side table so we do not have to smell it." Beatrice's hand shook. She looked down at her plate, her eyes filling with tears. She tried to reach for her water glass to hide her face, but her stroke had left her coordination weak. Her hand spasmed. The glass tipped over. Red cranberry sauce and water flooded across the white tablecloth and splashed onto the hem of Tiffany's silver dress. The reaction was instant. Tiffany screamed like she had been shot. She jumped up her chair, scraping violently against the floor. "You stupid old hag," she shrieked. "This is a Versace dress. Do you know how much this costs? You ruin everything. You are useless. Look at you. You cannot even eat like a human being." Beatrice was trembling violently now, trying to wipe the spill with a napkin, mumbling apologies. "I am sorry. I am so sorry," she whispered. I started to rise from my chair to help her, but Marcus was faster. He did not move to help his mother. He moved to punish her. He stood up, his face twisted with a rage that did not belong to a son. "Stop it!" he roared. He grabbed the napkin from his mother's hand, and then with a backhand motion that seemed practiced, he slapped her. The sound cracked through the room. It was a dry, heavy sound. My wife, frail and weak, toppled sideways from her chair and hit the hardwood floor with a thud that stopped my heart. For a second, there was absolute silence. Then the sound of clapping cut through the air. I looked up. Tiffany was clapping. She was applauding. Finally, she said, a cruel smile twisting her beautiful face. Someone finally taught her a lesson. She needs to learn her place. If she is going to live under our roof, she needs to stop acting like a clumsy animal. Marcus stood over his mother, breathing hard, adjusting his cufflink. He looked at me, daring me to say something. "Pick her up, Dad," he said coldly, "and get her out of my dining room. She has ruined my appetite." I sat there for 1 second longer. In that second, the father in me died. The man who forgave mistake. The man who covered debts. The man who protected his son from the harsh realities of the world that man ceased to exist. In his place, the old union negotiator returned. returned. The man who had stared down corrupt bosses and organized strikes that shut down entire cities. I did not scream. I did not attack him. I stood up slowly, my knees popping. I walked over to Beatrice. I knelt down on the floor, ignoring the pain in my joints. I took my handkerchief and wiped a small trickle of blood from her lip. I helped her back into her wheelchair. I wheeled her away from the table toward the corner of the room where she would be safe. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Do not worry, B. It ends tonight." Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone. It is not a smartphone. It does not have apps, but it has the only number that matters right now. I dialed. It rang once. Silverstein. I said, my voice low and steady. "It is Ike." On the other end, Saul Silverstein, the most ruthless asset protection lawyer in the state of Georgia, answered immediately. He had been waiting for this call for 5 years. "Is it time?" Ike Saul asked. "Execute the Omega Protocol," I said. "Immediately. Cut everything. The house, the cards, the cars, the company access, everything. And send the eviction team. I want them out before dessert." I hung up and sat back down at the table. I picked up my fork and took a bite of the collard greens Tiffany had despised. Marcus looked at me and laughed nervous. "Who was that ordering a pizza or calling the nursing home to reserve a bed for yourself?" Tiffany giggled, pouring herself more wine. "Maybe he is calling the police on us. Can you imagine, officer, my son was mean to me? They would laugh in his face. This is our house, old man. We make the rules." I chewed the greens slowly. I swallowed. I looked Marcus dead in the eye. "You have never made a rule in your life, son," I said quietly. "You have only spent the money I let you hold." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Do not start with your old man's stories, Dad. I am the CEO of Jefferson Logistics. I am the one who lets you live here. I am the one who puts food in your mouth. Do not forget that, or you will be on the street with Mom." I checked my watch. Saul was efficient. It had been 12 minutes. Just then, a heavy pounding shook the front door. Boom, boom, boom. It was not a polite knock. It was the knock of authority. It was the knock of consequences arriving at the speed of sound. Tiffany stopped drinking. Marcus frowned. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered. He stood up and walked to the door, his arrogance still draped over him like a cape. Probably the caterers forgot something he yelled back at us. I turned my wheelchair, bound wife to face the hallway. "Watch this, B," I told her softly. "Watch God work." Marcus opened the door. Standing on the porch, framed by the swirling snow, was not a caterer. It was Sheriff Deptford, a man I had known since we served in Vietnam together. Behind him were 4 deputies and a man in a sharp suit holding a stack of papers. I heard Marcus's voice drop an octave. "Sheriff, is there a problem? We are having a private dinner." Sheriff Deptford did not smile. He stepped into the foyer, his boots leaving muddy tracks on the marble floor Tiffany protected so fiercely. "Marcus Jefferson," the sheriff asked. "Yes, I am Marcus Jefferson. This is my house. What is this about?" The man in the suit stepped forward. He was one of Silverstein's associates. He thrust the papers into Marcus's chest. "Mr. Jefferson, this is an immediate order of eviction and a restraining order issued by the owner of this property. You and your wife, Tiffany Jefferson, have exactly 10 minutes to vacate the premises." Marcus laughed. It was a high, hysterical sound. "Eviction? You are crazy. I own this house. I have the deed. I pay the mortgage." The lawyer shook his head calmly. "No, sir. You occupy this house under a revocable living trust managed by the Jefferson family holding. You are listed as a beneficiary with residency privileges that can be revoked instantly upon evidence of elder abuse or gross misconduct." Marcus turned pale. He looked back at me, sitting calmly at the dining table. "Dad, what is he talking about? Tell him to leave." I stood up and walked into the hallway, leaning on my cane. I looked at the son who had just slapped the woman who gave him birth. "I am the chairman of Jefferson Family Holdings, Marcus. I bought this house 5 years ago when you went bankrupt trying to impress your friends. I put it in a trust so you could keep your dignity. I let you pretend it was yours so you could feel like a man." I stepped closer to him. "But the contract has a clause 4A. Violence against any member of the trust results in immediate termination of all benefits. You hit your mother. You broke the contract." Tiffany ran into the hallway, her face flushed. "What is going on?" "Marcus, tell them to get out." Sheriff Deptford stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, you are trespassing. You have 5 minutes left to grab your coats. Anything else stays. If you do not leave, you will be arrested." "But my clothes, my jewelry," Tiffany shrieked. "Those were bought with company credit cards," I said, my voice cutting through her panic. "Cards that were canceled 3 minutes ago. They belong to the trust. They stay." Marcus looked at me, his eyes wide with a fear I had never seen before. It was the fear of a child realizing the safety net is gone. "Dad, please. It is Christmas Eve. It is freezing outside. Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at the open door where the snow was falling into the dark night. "I do not know, Marcus," I said. "Maybe you can go to a hotel. Oh wait, I canceled your personal Amex too. I guess you will have to figure it out, just like I had to figure out how to feed you when I was laid off in '82. I turned to the sheriff. "Get them out, Deptford." But Dad, Mom, Marcus yelled, looking past passed me to Beatrice. Beatrice did not look at it. She was eating her collard green. The deputies moved in. They grabbed Marcus and Tiffany by the arm. They did not let them pack a bag. They did not let them finish their wine. They were marched out the front door into the biting cold of the Atlanta winter, wearing nothing but their evening clothes. I walked to the door and watched them standing in the snow, shivering, looking back at the warmth and light of the paradise they had just lost. I looked at Marcus one last time. You said she needed to learn her place, I said, my voice hard as steel. Now you know yours. I slammed the heavy oak door shut and locked the deadbolt. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I turned back to my wife. The house was quiet. The toxic laughter was gone. I sat down next to Beatrice. I took her hand. More greens, my love, I asked. She smiled a real smile this time. Yes, Ike. And maybe a little of that wine. We ate in peace, but I knew this was just the beginning. Marcus was not going to give up $5 million without a fight. He would come back. He would come back with lawyers, with lies, and with a rage that would make tonight look like a playground fight. But he did not know about the cameras I had installed last week. He did not know about the forensic accountant I had hired to track the money he had been stealing from the company accounts to buy Tiffany's silence. My son thought the war was over because he was outside. He did not realize the war had just begun, and I had all the ammunition. When I checked my phone 10 minutes later, there was a notification from the bank. Credit card decline, Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Amount $800. I smiled. Welcome to the real world, son. The silence in the room was so thick you could choke on it. The echo of the front door slamming shut still hung in the air, but the chaos was far from over. My son Marcus stood in the hallway, his face a mask of disbelief and rapidly rising panic. He was still wearing his tuxedo, the bow tie slightly askew, a perfect metaphor for his life unraveling before his eyes. Tiffany, his wife, was clutching the banister, her silver dress shimmering mockingly in the foyer light. She looked like a queen who had just been told her castle was made of sand. Sheriff Deptford didn't waste time. He walked past Marcus into the dining room, his heavy boots thudding against the polished hardwood floor. He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the table right next to the cooling turkey. The papers slid across the white tablecloth and stopped just inches from my plate of collard green. What is this? Marcus stammered, following the sheriff back into the room. He reached for the papers, his hands trembling. What kind of sick joke is this? It is not a joke, son, I said, my voice calm but laced with a cold finality. It is an eviction notice. Effective immediately. Eviction. Marcus laughed, but it was a hollow, desperate sound. You cannot evict me. This is my house. I bought it. My name is on the deed. I pay the mortgage. I am the owner of this property. He looked at Tiffany for support, but she was staring at the papers on the table, her face draining of color. You do not own anything, Marcus, a voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Standing there was Saul Silverstein, my lawyer. He was 70 years old, short, and wore a suit that cost more than Marcus made in a month. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and a cane in the other. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a grandfather. But Marcus knew better. He knew Saul was the man who had cleaned up his messes for years. Saul, Marcus asked, his voice cracking, "What are you doing here? Tell Dad to stop this nonsense. Tell him he cannot kick me out of my own house." Saul walked into the room, his cane tapping rhythmically on the floor. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at me. "Good evening," Ike, Saul said. "Is everyone safe?" "For now," I replied. "Beatrice is fine." Saul nodded. He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. The sound was sharp and loud in the quiet room. He pulled out a single document bound in blue legal paper. "Marcus," Saul said, turning to face my son, "you seem to be under a significant misapprehension regarding your living situation. You do not own this house. You never did." "That is a lie," Marcus shouted, his face turning red. "I signed the papers 5 years ago. I remember. I was there at the closing. I stood in the office and signed the deed." Saul sighed the way a teacher sighs at a slow student. "You signed a residency agreement, Marcus, not a deed. Do you remember 5 years ago? Do you remember the bankruptcy? Do you remember the gambling debts? Do you remember the creditors threatening to take everything, including your reputation?" Marcus went silent. He looked down at the floor. "Of course you remember," I said, stepping forward. "You were on your knees in my living room begging me to save you. You were crying like a baby because you had lost everything trying to play big shot. You owed $2 million to people who do not take IOU." I looked at Tiffany. She was staring at her husband, wide, horrified eyes. She didn't know. Of course she didn't know. Marcus had built his entire marriage on a foundation of lies. "I saved you, Marcus," I continued. "I paid off your debt. I bought this house from the bank before they could auction it off. I put it in the Jefferson family trust so no one would know you were broke. I let you pretend it was yours so you could keep your pride. I let you tell everyone you were a self-made man. But there were conditions," Saul interjected, tapping the document with his finger. "Clause 4A, the morality clause. It states clearly that residency privileges are revocable immediately upon any act of violence or abuse against a member of the trust." Saul looked at Beatrice sitting quietly in her wheelchair in the corner. "You hit a beneficiary of the trust," Marcus, Saul said softly. "You struck your mother. That is a violation of the highest order. The contract is void. You are trespassing." Marcus Marcus looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad, please. It was a mistake. I lost my temper. I did not mean it. You cannot do this to me. I did not mean it. I repeated, my voice rising. You slapped her, Marcus. You slapped the woman who carried you, who fed you, who loved you when you were nothing but trouble. And then you let your wife laugh about it. You let her clap. I turned to Tiffany. And you, I said, you think you are better than us? You think we are just old baggage you have to tolerate. You are living in a house paid for by my sweat. You are wearing clothes paid for by my investment. You are eating food paid for by my money. And you dare to call my wife useless. Tiffany opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked at Marcus, waiting for him to fix it, to tell her it was all a lie. But Marcus just stood there defeated. Sheriff Deptford checked his watch. 5 minutes are up, folk. Time to go. But where? Marcus cried. We have nowhere to go. Our accounts are frozen. We have no cash. That sounds like a personal problem, I said. The deputies moved in. They were not rough, but they were firm. They took Marcus by the arm. They took Tiffany by the elbow. Wait! Tiffany shrieked. My purse, my phone. It stays, I said. It was bought with company funds. It belongs to the trust. They were marched to the door. Marcus tried to dig his heels in, tried to argue, but it was useless. The illusion was shattered. The king had no clothes. As they reached the threshold, I walked over to them. The cold air blew in, carrying snowflakes that landed on the marble floor. Marcus looked at me one last time. There was hate in his eye, but under the hate, there was fear. A deep, primal fear of the world he was about to face without my protection. You are ruining my life, he spat. No, son, I said. I am giving you the opportunity to build a real one you actually earn. I nodded to the sheriff. They were pushed out into the night. The door slammed shut. I locked it. I heard Tiffany screaming outside, her voice muffled by the thick wood. I heard Marcus banging on the door, shouting my name. Then silent. I turned back to the room. The dinner table was still set. The candles were still burning. The food was still warm, but the air was lighter. The heaviness was gone. Saul was packing his papers back into his briefcase. He looked at me and gave a small, sad smile. It is done, Ike, he said. The locks will be changed in an hour. Security is on the way to secure the perimeter. Thank you, Saul, I said. I walked over to Beatrice. She was looking at the closed door, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Are they going to be okay? Ike, she asked softly. I knelt beside her and took her hand. It was still shaking slightly. They are young, Bea, I said. They have their health. They have their wits. They have more than we had when we started. They will figure it out. Or they won't. But they will not hurt you again. Not in this life. She nodded and squeezed my hand. I stood up and looked around the room. This house, this mansion I had bought to save my son's ego felt different now. It didn't feel like a stage anymore. It felt like a fortress I had built and a fortress I would now command. I walked to the head of the table where Marcus had sat just moments ago. I picked up his wine glass still half full of the expensive vintage he loved so much. I poured it into the ice bucket. Then I picked up the bowl of collard greens Tiffany had tried to ban it. I placed it in the center of the table right next to the crystal centerpiece. I sat down in my chair. Saul, Sheriff, I said, please sit. There is plenty of food. And this time we are going to eat with respect. Outside, the wind howled. I imagined Marcus and Tiffany walking down the long driveway in their evening clothes, the snow soaking through their thin shoes. I imagined them realizing that the credit cards in their pockets were just useless plastic. I imagined the long, cold walk to the main road where they would have to flag down a taxi they couldn't pay for. It was a harsh lesson, maybe the harshest I had ever given. But as I looked at my wife safe and calm for the first time in years, I knew it was the only lesson that would stick. I took a bite of the greens. They were delicious. They tasted like home. They tasted like dignity. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just Ike, the retired steelworker. I wasn't just the quiet old man in the guest suite. I was Isaiah Jefferson, and I had taken back my house. The wind howled through the streets of Atlanta, carrying with it a biting cold that seemed to seep into the very bones of anyone foolish enough to be outside. Marcus and Tiffany, shivering in their evening clothes, had hailed a taxi with the last of their cash, directing the driver to the Ritz-Carlton. It was the only place Tiffany would accept a sanctuary of luxury where she could pretend even for a night that her world hadn't just imploded. They stood at the check-in counter, the opulent lobby, a stark contrast to the snow swirling outside. Marcus, his tuxedo now damp and wrinkled, slapped his platinum credit card onto the marble surface with a confidence he didn't feel. A suite, he demanded, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged space. The best you have available, and have room service send up a bottle of champagne immediately. The receptionist, a young woman with a polite smile, took the card and swiped it. She waited a moment, then frowned. She swiped it again. I am sorry, sir, she said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. This card has been declined. Declined? Marcus scoffed, his arrogance flaring up like a defense mechanism. That is impossible. Try it again. It must be your machine. She tried again. Still declined, sir. Do you have another form of payment? Marcus fumbled in his wallet, pulling out another card, then another. The black card, the gold card, the corporate expense card. One by one they were swiped. One by one the receptionist shook her head, her smile becoming strained. Declined, declined, Declined. I am afraid all of these cards have been flagged, sir. Tiffany, who had been examining her reflection in a nearby mirror, spun around. Her eyes narrowed. Marcus, what is going on? Why are the cards not working? It is a mistake, Tiff, Marcus stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in his bones. Just a bank error. I will call them right now. He pulled out his phone and dialed the priority line for his bank. He put it on speaker, his hands shaking. Welcome to First National, the automated voice chirped. Please enter your account number. Marcus punched in the numbers. There was a pause, then a live operator came on the line. Mr. Jefferson, the operator said, his tone professional but cold. I see you are calling about your accounts. Yes, Marcus barked. My cards are being declined. Fix it immediately. Do you know who I am? We know exactly who you are, sir, the operator replied. However, the primary account holder, Mr. Isaiah Jefferson, has removed you as an authorized user from all credit lines. Furthermore, the personal loans secured against the family trust have been called in. Your accounts are frozen pending a fraud investigation. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Primary account holder, Tiffany screeched, her voice shrill enough to turn heads in the lobby. What does that mean? You said these were your accounts. Marcus stared at the phone, his face draining of color. Dad, he whispered. He canceled everything. Mr. Jefferson, the operator continued. There is also a note here from the primary holder. It says, tell him he can keep the change in his pocket. The line went dead. Marcus stood there, the phone slipping from his fingers. He looked at Tiffany, expecting sympathy, expecting support. Instead, he saw a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. You mean to tell me, Tiffany hissed, stepping closer to him, her voice low and venomous, that you do not have any money, that all this time you have been spending his money? It is complicated, Tiff, Marcus pleaded, reaching for her hand. She slapped it away. Do not touch me, she yelled. You told me you were a self-made man. You told me that old man was just a senile relic living off your charity, and now you are telling me he owns everything, even the credit card. Sir, ma'am, the receptionist interrupted, her voice firm. If you cannot pay, I must ask you to leave. You are disturbing the other guests. They were escorted out by security back into the freezing night. The Ritz-Carlton doors closed behind them with a finality that echoed the door of the mansion just an hour before. They walked. They had no choice. The taxi driver had left. Their phones were dying. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city in a blanket of white that felt less like a wonderland and more like a shroud. They ended up at the only place that would take cash for a room at 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve without a reservation, the Starlight Motel, a rundown single-story building on the outskirts of town with neon lights buzzing ominously and peeling paint. The room smelled of stale smoke and cheap disinfectant. The carpet was sticky. The heater rattled and groaned, barely putting out enough warmth to chase away the chill. Tiffany sat on the edge of the sagging bed, still in her silver gown, looking like a diamond dropped in the mud. She stared at the stained wallpaper, her face a mask of fury. Marcus paced the small room, rubbing his arm. It is just for tonight, baby, he said, trying to sound optimistic. Tomorrow I will fix this. I will call the lawyers. I will sue him. He cannot do this. Tiffany looked up. Her eyes were cold, calculate. The mask of the loving wife had slipped completely, revealing the predator underneath. You really are pathetic, aren't you? She said softly. What? Marcus stopped pacing. I married a CEO, she spat. I married a man who commanded respect. I married a man who promised me the world. And now look at us, in a roach motel, freezing because your daddy cut off your allowance. He is crazy, Tiffany, Marcus shouted. He is vindictive. He planned this, and you let him, she screamed back, standing up. You told me he was weak. You told me he was nothing. You said, don't worry about the old man. He does whatever I say. Well, guess what, Marcus? It looks like you are the one who is nothing without him. She walked over to the small mirror above the dresser and started taking off her earring. You better fix this, Marcus, fast, because I did not sign up for poverty. I did not sign up for this. I will, Marcus insisted, his voice desperate. I will get it all back. The house, the money. It is mine by right. Is it? Tiffany laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Because from where I am standing, it looks like you are just a broke man in a tuxedo, shivering in a dump. And honestly, it is not a good look on you. She threw the earrings onto the dresser and lay down on the bed, turning her back to him. Figure it out, Marcus, or do not. But if we are still here tomorrow night, you will be here alone. Marcus stood in the center of the room, the sound of the heater rattling in his ears. He looked at his wife's back, at the cheap curtains, at his own trembling hand. For the first time in his life, Marcus Jefferson was truly alone. He had no safety net, no daddy to bail him out, no money to buy his way out of trouble. He sat down on the floor, pulling his knees to his chest. He thought about the slap. He thought about his mother's face. He thought about his father's cold, hard stare. And as the wind howled outside the thin walls of the motel, Marcus realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that the nightmare had only just begun. He wasn't the king of the castle anymore. He was just a pauper in a rented room, and the bill was coming due. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. 3% battery left. He opened his banking app, hoping, praying for a glitch. Balance $0. Status frozen. He stared at the screen until it went black. The darkness of the room swallowed him whole. The silence in my house the next morning was not empty. It was heavy with peace. The kind of peace you have to buy at a high price. For the first time in years, I did not wake up to the sound of Tiffany screaming at the maids or Marcus blasting business news on the television. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the soft murmur of a professional doing her job. I walked out of the guest suite, which was no longer a guest suite, but the master bedroom, again and down the hall. In the sunroom, where the morning light hit the hardest, sat my wife Beatrice. She was not slumped in her wheelchair with a stained bib. She was sitting in her favorite armchair wrapped in a cashmere throw blanket, her hair brushed and braided with care. Sitting across from her was Mrs. Eudora, a woman I had hired at 4 a.m. through a private agency that caters to senators and athletes. Mrs. Eudora was a large woman with hands that looked like they could crush a walnut but touched my wife like she was made of spun glass. "Good morning, Mr. Jefferson," Mrs. Eudora said, her voice low and respectful. Mrs. Beatrice just finished her breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon and fresh berries. She ate it all. I looked at Beatrice. Her eyes were clear. She smiled at me, a small, crooked smile that was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "You let me know if she needs anything at all. The budget is unlimited." I left them to their peace because I had work to do. I walked into my study, a room Marcus had tried to turn into a game room, but I had kept locked. This was my command center. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco, the smell of a man who thinks before he speaks. I sat down at my heavy oak desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a keypad hidden under a false bottom. I punched in the code, a combination of Beatrice's birthday and the date I organized my first strike at the steel mill. The wall panel slid open, revealing the safe. This was where the real Jefferson legacy lived. Not in the flashy cars Marcus drove, but in the stack of bonds, the property deeds, and the gold coins I had bought every time the market dipped. I began the inventory. My hands moved with the precision of a man who has counted inventory in a warehouse for 40 years. The cash was there, the bearer bonds were there, the deeds to the commercial properties in downtown Atlanta were there. Then I reached for the blue velvet box on the top shelf. My hand closed around air. I froze. A cold feeling started at the base of my spine and crawled up to my neck. I looked closer. The spot where the box usually sat was empty. There was just a small circle in the dust where it had been. It was not just a box. Inside that velvet case was the diamond necklace and earrings set I had bought for Beatrice for our 50th wedding anniversary. It cost me $150,000, but the price tag did not matter. What mattered was that I had saved for 10 years to buy it. I had worked overtime shifts when my knees were screaming in pain. I had skipped lunches. I had invested risky money just to get that specific set because Beatrice had looked at a picture of it in a magazine 20 years ago and said it looked like stars falling from the sky. It was her legacy. It was the only thing of true value she owned that was just for her. I felt a rage building in me that was different from the night before. Last night was anger at disrespect. This was anger at violation. Someone had come into my sanctuary. Someone had stolen my wife's star. I did not panic. I did not start throwing things. I stood up and walked to the computer monitor in the corner of the room. I had installed the hidden camera system 2 weeks ago, not because I was paranoid, but because I was a man who noticed things. I had noticed Marcus eyeing the study door. I had noticed Tiffany asking too many questions about where I kept my important papers. I logged into the server. I scrolled back through the footage. Yesterday was the dinner. The day before was Tuesday. I scanned the timeline. There it was, Tuesday at 2 p.m. On the screen in high-definition black and white, I saw the door to my study open. Tiffany walked in. She was not wearing her usual loungewear. She was dressed in black like she thought she was in a spy movie, but her movements were clumsy and arrogant. She did not look scared. She looked entitled. I watched her walk straight to the wall panel. She did not know the code, but she didn't need to. I saw her pull a small piece of paper from her pocket. My breath hit. I recognized that paper. It was a note I had written for Beatrice in case I died suddenly hiding it in my Bible. Tiffany must have gone through my Bible. She punched in the code. The safe opened. I watched my daughter-in-law, the woman I had welcomed into my home, reach in. She did not touch the deed. She did not touch the cash. She went straight for the blue velvet box. She opened it, and I saw the glitter of diamonds reflect on her face. She smiled. It was a greedy, twisted smile. She took the necklace out and held it up against her neck, posing in the reflection of the window. Then she stuffed the jewelry into her bra, put the empty box back in the safe, and closed the panel. She did not just steal from me. She stole from a stroke victim. She stole the symbol of 50 years of marriage. I sat back in my chair. The image of her stuffing those diamonds into her clothes burned into my retinas. My hand hovered over the phone. The police station number was on speed dial. jail. I could have her arrested in 20 minutes. Grand larceny, breaking and entering, elder abuse. She would go to jail for 10 years. But jail was too easy. Jail had bail. Jail had plea deals. Jail meant she would be a victim in her own mind, a martyr who made a mistake. No, I wanted something more permanent. I wanted to take away her future just like she had tried to take away my past. I picked up the phone and dialed a number that started with an 800 area code but routed directly to a high-rise office in Hartford, Connecticut. The phone rang 3 times. Special Investigations Unit. This is Agent Vance. Vance, I said, my voice gravel. It is Isaiah Jefferson. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. Mr. Jefferson, we have not heard from you since you insured the commercial fleet. Is everything all right? No, Vance. I need to file a claim. Theft of scheduled personal property. The VVS1 diamond set. Policy number ending in 459. I heard the typing on the other end. Okay, I have the policy up. Value $150,000. When did the theft occur? 2 days ago, I said. I have video evidence. High definition. Face visible. Intent clear. Okay, we will need a police report number to process the payout and launch the investigation. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. I am not calling the police, Vance. Not today. I do not want the money back. I want to file the report directly with the National Insurance Crime Bureau. I want to name the suspect. I want her name flagged in the ISO claims search database. I want a red flag next to her social security number that glows in the dark. Vance stopped typing. I could hear him breathing. Mr. Jefferson, if we do that without a police report, it is highly irregular. It effectively blacklists the individual. No insurance company will touch them. No car insurance. No renter's insurance. No bonding for employment. It destroys their financial identity. I know what it does, Vance, I said coldly. That is why I am calling you. The suspect is Tiffany Jefferson, my former daughter-in-law. She used a stolen code to access a secure safe. She took the diamond. I have the video. I will upload it to your secure server right now. There was a long silence. Vance was a company man, but he knew me. He knew I didn't play game. If you have the video, Vance said slowly, we can process it as an internal fraud investigation. We can place a freeze on her insurability pending the return of the assets. If she tries to pawn them, if she tries to insure them, if she tries to get a job that requires a background check, this will pop up. She will be radioactive. Do it, I said. And Vance, yes, sir. Send a notification to the local pawnbroker association. Send the serial numbers of the diamond. If she tries to sell them, I want to know who she talks to. Understood, Mr. Jefferson. I am opening the file now. I hung up the phone. My hands were steady. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Police take you to a cell for a night. The insurance blacklist takes away your ability to live in the modern world. Tiffany thought she was smart. She thought she could steal my wife's diamonds and run away to start a new life. She did not realize that in the world of high finance and asset protection, you do not need a badge to destroy someone. You just need the right database. I looked at the empty spot on the shelf one last time. You took her stars, Tiffany, I whispered to the empty room. Now I am going to take your sky. I stood up and walked out of the office, locking the door behind me. I went back to the sunroom. Beatrice was watching the birds outside the window. Mrs. Eudora was reading a book nearby. Ike, Beatrice said without turning around, did you find what you were looking for? I walked over and kissed the top of her head. I am handling it, Bea, I said. Do not worry. The stars will come back. She patted my hand. I know they will, Ike. You always bring them back. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. The snow was melting, revealing the gray asphalt beneath. Marcus and Tiffany were out there somewhere, probably waking up in a cheap motel, realizing that their credit cards were dead, but they did not know the storm that was coming. Tiffany was walking around with a felony around her neck, and she had just become the most uninsurable woman in America. And the best part was, she wouldn't know until she tried to move, until she tried to rent an apartment, until she tried to get a job. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the snap. Monday morning at Jefferson Logistics usually started with the hum of productivity, the sound of phones ringing, and the steady rhythm of commerce moving across the state of Georgia. I built this company from a single delivery truck and a stack of maps in 1982. I knew every bolt in the fleet, every driver by name, and every crack in the pavement of the loading dock. My son Marcus, the man I had appointed CEO 3 years ago, knew none of these things. To him, the company was just a magical machine that printed money for his lifestyle, and this morning, he was coming to make a withdrawal. I was sitting in the boardroom on the top floor, a room Marcus rarely used because he preferred taking clients to 3 martini lunches. The blinds were drawn, but I could see the security feed on the tablet in front of me. I watched my son's car screech into the executive parking spot. He was driving the company Maserati, a perk he had insisted was necessary for the corporate image. He stepped out looking disheveled. He was wearing a fresh suit, but his movements were jerky, desperate. He wasn't walking with the swagger of a CEO. He was walking with the panic of a man who knows the walls are closing in. He needed money. I knew this because my friend forensic accountant, Mr. Henderson, had flagged 3 attempted transfers from the corporate operating account at 4 in the morning. Marcus was trying to move $200,000 to a retainer account for a high-profile defense attorney. He wanted to sue me. He wanted to sue his own father for eviction and emotional distress. He wanted to use my own money to destroy me, but the transfers had failed, and now he was coming to force the issue. I watched on the screen as he stormed into the lobby. He ignored the receptionist, a sweet girl named Sarah who had been with us for 5 years. He walked straight to the private executive elevator, the one that required a biometric key card. He slapped his card against the reader. Nothing happened. He slapped it again harder this time. A small red light blinked on the panel. Access denied. I saw him curse. He rubbed the card on his jacket sleeve and tried again. Access denied. He turned to the security desk. The guard on duty was Miller, a former linebacker who I had hired personally. Marcus had threatened to fire Miller twice last month for not opening the door fast enough. Marcus shouted, his voice echoing in the marble lobby. "Fix the elevator. My card is demagnetized." Miller didn't move from behind the desk. He didn't salute. He didn't jump. He just looked at Marcus with a calm, flat stare. "I am afraid I cannot do that," Mr. Jefferson Miller said. "Your clearance has been revoked." "Revoked?" Marcus laughed, a high-pitched, incredulous sound. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of this company. I sign your checks. Now open the elevator before I have you thrown out on the street." "I do not think you sign the checks anymore, sir," Miller replied. "You need to go to the front desk and sign in as a visitor, if you have an appointment." Marcus looked like he was about to explode. His face turned a deep, ugly shade of purple. He didn't sign in. Instead, he lunged for the turnstiles, vaulting over them with a desperate athleticism I didn't know he possessed. He ran for the stairwell door, yanking it open before Miller could stop him. "Let him come," I whispered to the empty boardroom. "Let him run." I sat at the head of the long mahogany table. To my right sat the board of directors, 3 men and 2 women who had been with me since the early days. They looked uncomfortable. They had always indulged Marcus because he was my son, but they knew the numbers. They knew the truth. To my left sat Mr. Henderson, the accountant, with a stack of files thick enough to stop a bullet. We waited. It was 12 flights of stairs. I wanted Marcus to feel every single step. I wanted him to arrive sweating and out of breath. I wanted him to be tired when the hammer fell. 5 minutes later, the double doors of the boardroom burst open. Marcus stood there, heaving sweat dripping down his forehead. He looked wild. He looked cornered. "What the hell is going on?" he screamed, storming into the room. "Why are my cards locked? Why is security disrespecting me? I want everyone fired." Henderson cut a check for $200,000 immediately. "I have a legal emergency." He stopped. He finally realized the room wasn't empty. He saw the board, he saw the file, and then he saw me. I was sitting in the chairman's seat. It was a chair I hadn't sat in for 3 years, ever since I semi-retired to take care of Beatrice. But the leather still molded to my back perfectly. "Dad," Marcus breathed. "What are you doing here? Get out of my chair." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "Sit down, Marcus," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of the entire building. "I do not have time to sit," Marcus yelled, pacing the end of the table. "I need money. You illegally evicted me. You stole my house. I am going to sue you for everything you have. Henderson, did you hear me cut the check?" Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at me. "Mr. Chairman," he said, "shall I proceed with the report?" "Proceed," I said. Marcus froze. "Mr. Chairman, what is this?" "I am the CEO." "Not anymore," I said. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, the board has voted unanimously to remove you from your position for cause." "For cause," Marcus sputtered. "What cause? I increased profits by 10% last quarter." "You increased revenue," Mr. Henderson corrected calmly, "but profits are down. Significantly down, mostly due to a category of expenses labeled under miscellaneous consulting and client relations." Marcus went pale. He stopped pacing. I picked up the file in front of me and opened it. I pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of a handbag, a Hermes Birkin bag, orange crocodile skin. "This bag cost $45,000, I read from the invoice attached to the photo. "It was purchased 3 months ago on the Corporate American Express. The expense report signed by you lists it as IT infrastructure upgrade." I slid the photo down the long table. It spun and stopped right in front of Marcus. "I did not know Hermes made servers, son," I said. Marcus stared at the photo. Beads of sweat were running down his nose. That was a gift for a client," he stammered. "A very important client in Europe. It was necessary to close the deal." I pulled out another photo. This one was from Tiffany's Instagram account. It showed her posing with the bag, tagging it, "Hatch new baby," and "hashosh hubby spoils me." The date matched the invoice exact. "Funny," I said. "The client looks a lot like your wife." I pulled out another sheet. "And here we have a charge for $12,000 at a spa in the Maldives, listed as leadership training retreat. And here a charge for $6,000 for a set of custom rims for a G-Wagon, listed as fleet maintenance." I stood up. I picked up the stack of papers and threw them onto the table. They scattered like leaves, a paper trail of greed and stupidity. "You stole from this company, Marcus. You used the labor of men and women who worked 12-hour shifts to buy purses for a woman who clapped when you hit your mother. That is not just bad business. That is embezzlement. That is a felony." Marcus backed away, shaking his head. "You cannot prove intent. I will pay it back. Just deduct it from my severance." severance. I quit. I am leaving. There is no severance, I said, walking around the table toward him. You are fired for gross misconduct. You leave with nothing. No golden parachute, no stock options, nothing but the suit on your back. Frankly, I should take that too because I paid for the tailor. Marcus hit the wall. He had nowhere else to go. His face crumbled. The arrogance, the bluster, it all evaporated, leaving behind a scared little boy who got caught with his hand in the jar. Dad, please, he whispered. You cannot do this. I will go to jail. If you report this, I will go to prison. I stopped inches from his face. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of the son I used to know. But all I saw was a reflection of Tiffany's greed. You should have thought about that before you raised your hand to my wife. I turned to the security guards who had quietly entered the room behind. Miller was there, looking grim. Escort Mr. Jefferson out of the building, I ordered. He is not allowed to retrieve any personal items from his office. His laptop and phone are company property. Take them now. Miller stepped forward. Mr. Jefferson, please hand over the device. Marcus looked at me one last time. Dad, please. I have no money. I have no home. Tiffany, she will leave me if I am broke. I leaned in close so only he could hear. Good, I said. Then maybe you will finally learn what it means to be a man. Miller grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus tried to pull away, but it was useless. He was dragged out of the boardroom, his shoes squeaking on the floor. He didn't scream this time. He was too broken to scream. The doors closed. The room was silent again. I walked back to the head of the table and sat down. I smoothed my tie. I looked at the board members. They were all looking at me with a mix of fear and respect. Now I said, opening the operations file, let's get back to work. We have a company to save. I spent the next 4 hours untangling the mess my son had made. I authorized the sale of the company yacht he had bought in secret. I canceled the lease on the private jet. I reinstated the pension fund contributions he had paused to pay for his renovation. By the time I left the office, it was dark. I walked to the elevator, the real CEO again. Miller was at the desk downstairs. He left quietly, Sir Miller said. He sat on the curb outside for about an hour. Then he started walking. Walking, I asked. Yes, sir. He tried to call an Uber, but I guess his app wasn't working. I nodded. Good night, Miller. Good night, Mr. Jefferson. I walked out to my truck. The air was cold, but it felt clean. I drove home to Beatrice. I had fired my own son. I had stripped him of his power, his money, and his reputation. But as I drove, I didn't feel guilt. I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had spent years trying to build a world where Marcus would never have to struggle. I thought that was love, but I was wrong. The struggle is what makes you. By taking it away, I had made him weak. Now I was giving the struggle back to him. It was the only gift I had left to give. When I got home, Mrs. Eudora met me at the door. Mr. Jefferson, she said, her face serious. You had a visitor while you were gone. Who? I asked, my hand instinctively going to my cane. A young woman said, blonde, very fancy clothes. She said her name was Tiffany. My eyes narrowed. Did you let her in? No, sir, Mrs. Eudora said, crossing her massive arm. I told her that Mrs. Beatrice was resting and that if she did not get off the porch, I would physically remove her. She left a letter. She handed me a scented envelope. I recognized the handwriting. It was Tiffany. I didn't open it. I walked to the fireplace in the living room where a fire was crackling warmly. I looked at the envelope. I knew what was inside. Lies, excuses, attempts to blame Marcus, attempts to manipulate me. I tossed the envelope into the fire. I watched the paper curl and blacken the flames, licking at the expensive stationery. I didn't need to read her lies. I had already seen her soul on the security camera stealing my wife's diamond, and tomorrow the insurance blacklist would go live. Tiffany thought she could charm her way back in. She didn't realize that the bridge wasn't just burned. I had blown up the foundation. I went to sit with Beatrice. She was watching Wheel of Fortune. Ike, she said, not looking away from the screen. Did you have a hard day? It was a long day, Bea, I said. But it is over now. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was stronger than it had been yesterday. I am glad, she said. I do not like it when you are gone too long. The house feels too big. I squeezed her hand. I am not going anywhere, Bea. I am right here. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I was back, and I was ready for whatever came next. The fire in the library had burned down to glowing embers by the time the intercom buzzed. It was late past the time decent folks came calling, but I knew who was at the gate before Miller even spoke. It was Tiffany. I watched the security monitor as she argued with the guard at the gate. She wasn't wearing the silver dress anymore. She was dressed in jeans and a sweater, looking like a college student who had lost her way. She had scrubbed the makeup off her face, trying to look innocent, trying to look like the victim. Let her in, Miller, I said into the speaker. Are you sure, Mr. Jefferson? Miller asked, his voice tight. She looks desperate. I am sure. Bring her to the library. I sat back in my leather chair and waited. I had expected Marcus to come back begging first, but Tiffany was a survivor. Survivors do not wait for the ship to sink completely before the jump. They look for the next life raft. And right now, she thought I was that raft. When the heavy oak doors opened, Tiffany walked in with her head down. She hesitated at the threshold, wringing her hand. It was a good performance. If I did not know better, I would have felt sorry for her. Dad, she whispered, her voice trembling. Can I come in? I did not answer. I just pointed to the chair opposite my desk. She sat down on the edge of the seat, keeping her knees together, looking small and fragile. She looked up at me with big, watery eyes. eyes. I am so sorry, she said, and then the tears started, great heaving sobs that shook her shoulders. I did not know where else to go. Marcus, he has gone crazy. He is screaming at everyone. He is breaking things. I was scared. I had to get away. I watched her cry. I handed her a tissue from the box on my desk. What do you want, Tiffany? I asked, my voice flat. I want you to know the truth, she choked out, dabbing at her eye. Last night, at dinner, I did not want to clap. You have to believe me. Marcus made me. He has been so controlling lately. He told me if I did not support him against you, he would cut me off. He said he would leave me with nothing. I was terrified. She looked up imploring. I love Beatrice, she continued. You know she has always been so sweet to me. Seeing him hit her, it broke my heart, but I froze. And then when he looked at me with those crazy eyes, I panicked. I clapped because I was afraid he would hit me next. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. It was a compelling story. The abusive husband, the fearful wife. It painted Marcus as the sole villain and her as just another victim of his rage. It was almost perfect. So you are saying you had no choice? No choice at all, she said, nodding eagerly. He is a monster, Dad. I see that. And now that he has lost his job, he is even worse. I cannot go back to him. I cannot live like that. She stood up and walked around the desk. She knelt beside my chair, putting her hand on my arm. Her grip was warm, but her eyes were cold. Please let me stay here, she pleaded. I can help. I can take care of Beatrice. I know she needs help eating and bathing. I can do that. I can be the daughter she never had. I can make it up to you. I will cook. I will clean. I will do anything. Just please do not make me go back to him. Do not throw me out on the street. She leaned closer. I could smell her perfume. It was expensive. It was the same perfume I had seen on the credit card bill Marcus tried to hide last month. You need someone here, she whispered. You are getting older. Beatrice is sick. Marcus is gone. Who is going to look after the family legacy? I can help you run the house. I can help you with the accounts. I learned a lot watching Marcus. I know where the money goes. There it was. The hook. She did not just want shelter. She wanted access. She wanted to replace Marcus, not as a son, but as the leech attached to the vein. She thought I was a lonely old man who would be grateful for a pretty young woman paying attention to him. She thought she could trade her loyalty for a spot in the will. I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her tear-stained face. You make a very convincing case, Tiffany, I said. Hope flared in her eyes. Thank you, Dad. I knew you would understand. I knew you were a good man. I stood up slowly, forcing her to take her hand off. I walked over to the bookshelf and picked up a small digital recorder. It was the same model I had used during union negotiations in the 90s. Reliable, clear. I do not think you understand what kind of man I am, Tiffany, I said, turning back to her. I am a man who listens. I pressed play. The sound that filled the room was not from the dinner table. It was the echoey acoustic of a tiled room, a bathroom. I heard the sound of running water. Then I heard Tiffany's voice clear as day. She was talking on her cell phone. I tell you, Jessica, it is a nightmare. The old hag is disgusting. She drools when she eats. She smells like old medicine. I have to hold my breath every time I walk past her wheelchair. And the old man, he is just as bad. He walks around like he owns the place just because he bought it. I cannot wait until they both kick the bucket. Marcus says the trust dissolves when they die. Then we get everything. The house, the portfolio, the life insurance. God, hurry up and die already. There was a pause in the recording, then the sound of a toilet flush. I stopped the tape. The silence in the library was absolute. Tiffany's face had gone from hopeful to ash gray. She stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That was recorded 20 minutes before dinner started, I said, my voice low. You were in the powder room downstairs. You thought you were alone. But in this house, the walls have ears, especially when I pay for the walls. Dad, she stammered, backing away. I was just venting. I did not mean it. Jessica, she brings out the worst in me. It was just talk. Just talk, I repeated. You wished death on my wife. You called her disgusting. And now you want to be her nurse. You want to bathe her. I walked back to my desk and opened the top drawer. I pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick. You said Marcus was controlling, I said. You said you were afraid of him. You said you had no choice. I tossed the envelope onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of her. Open it, I commanded. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely undo the clasp. She pulled out the content. Photographs. High-resolution surveillance photos. The first photo showed Tiffany getting into a red convertible. The driver was not Marcus. He was a man with muscles that bulged out of his t-shirt. He looked like he spent more time lifting weights than reading books. The second photo showed them at a cafe holding hands. The third photo showed them entering a hotel. The timestamp was 2 days ago, the same day she stole the diamond. The fourth photo left nothing to the imagination. It was taken through a hotel window. That is Chad, isn't it? I asked. The personal trainer trainer Marcus pays $200 an hour to train you. Looks like he is giving you a very comprehensive workout. Tiffany dropped the photo. She looked sick. You had me followed, she whispered. I have everyone followed when money goes missing, I said. You charged the hotel room to the corporate card, Tiffany. Did you think I wouldn't see the invoice? Did you think I wouldn't check who was staying in the room? I walked around the desk until I was standing right in front of her. You are not a victim, Tiffany. You are a predator. You cheated on my son while spending his money. You stole from my wife while living in her house, and you wished us dead so you could cash out. She looked up at me, and I saw the mask fall completely. The tears stopped. The fear vanished, replaced by a hard, ugly sneer. So what, she spat. Marcus is a loser. He is weak. He let you run his life. Chad is a real man. And Beatrice, she is a vegetable. She is barely alive. Why should she have diamonds she cannot even wear? Why should she live in a mansion she cannot even walk in? It is a waste. I felt a surge of anger so hot it almost blinded me, but I pushed it down. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to hit her so she could sue me. I would not give her that satisfaction. I picked up the photos and put them back in the envelope. You have 24 hours, I said, my voice ice cold. What, she asked, confused. You have 24 hours to leave the state of Georgia. If you are still within the state lines by this time tomorrow, I will send these photos to Mark. I will send them to his lawyer. I will send them to every news outlet in Atlanta. The headline will be, CEO's wife caught with trainer while embezzling company fund. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. Marcus would kill me. He has a temper. I know, I said. I saw him hit his mother. Imagine what he will do when he finds out you have been sleeping with the help on his dime. Imagine what he will do when he finds out you are the reason he lost his job. Because I am going to tell him you were the one stealing the money too. I am going to pin every single missing dollar on you. That is a lie, she screamed. Marcus spent that money too. Who do you think he will believe, I asked? The father who holds the purse strings, or the wife who was screwing the trainer? She stared at me, realizing she was checkmated. She had no allies, she had no money, she had no leverage. And, Tiffany, I added, do not think you can go to another state and start over with a new rich husband. I spoke to the insurance commission. Your name is on the blacklist. You cannot get insured. You cannot get bonded. You are a liability. Financial toxic waste. She looked at me with pure hatred. You are a devil, she hissed. No, I said. I am a father protecting his family, and you are no longer family. Get out. She grabbed her purse and ran. She did not look back. She ran out of the library, out of the house, and into the night. I watched her go on the security monitor. I watched her run down the driveway, stumbling in the dark. She did not have a car. She did not have a coat. She just ran. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus. It went to voicemail. Marcus, I said, this is your father. I just had an interesting conversation with your wife. She stopped by. She had some things to say about you, and I have some things to show you. Check your email in 24 hours. I hung up. I knew Marcus would listen. I knew he was sitting in that cheap motel wondering where his wife was, and now the seed of doubt was planted. Tiffany was running, but she had nowhere to go. Marcus was waiting, but he had nothing to wait for. I sat back in my chair and looked at the fire. The embers were dying out, but I felt warm. One down, one to go. The night air was still that heavy, suffocating stillness that often comes before a storm. But the storm that was coming wasn't made of wind and rain. It was made of flesh and blood. I sat on the front porch of the mansion, the one my son thought he owned, rocking slowly in the wooden chair I had brought over from our old house in Decatur. Across my lap lay Betsy, my old 12-gauge Remington. It wasn't loaded. It didn't need to be. The weight of it was enough. The memory of what it represented was enough. I knew he was coming. I felt it in my knees the same way I used to feel a boiler about to blow at the steel mill. I had sent the email to Marcus's burner phone 2 hours ago. The photos of his wife with her trainer. The video of her stealing the diamond. The evidence that she had forged his signature on the loan documents that were currently suffocating him. I knew exactly what would happen when he read it. He would turn to the woman sleeping next to him in that roach-infested motel looking for answers, but she wouldn't be there. Tiffany was long gone. My security team had tracked her crossing the state line into Alabama an hour ago, driving the 2018 Honda Civic that was the last vehicle registered in Marcus's name, the one car I hadn't seized, because I wanted him to have a way to get to a job interview. She had taken it. She had taken the car, the last of his cash, and whatever dignity he had left. And now a man, with nothing left to lose, was walking up my driveway. I heard him before I saw him. The sound of heavy, stumbling footsteps on the gravel. He wasn't driving. Of course not. She took the car. He had walked 5 miles from the motel to here in the freezing cold, fueling his rage with every step. Then I smelled it, the sharp chemical sting of gasoline. Marcus emerged from the shadows of the oak tree. He looked like a wraith. His tuxedo shirt was torn and stained with sweat and dirt. His eyes were wild-rimmed with red, staring at the house with a mixture of longing and hatred. In his right hand, he dragged a red plastic gas can. It thumped against his leg with a hollow, rhythmic sound. He stopped at the bottom of the step. He didn't see me at first. He was too focused on the front door, the symbol symbol of the paradise he had been exiled from. "Open up!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Open the door, old man! I know you're in there!" He splashed gasoline onto the bottom step, the liquid dark and shiny in the moonlight. "I'm going to burn it down," he howled. "If I can't have it, no one can. You hear me? I will burn it all to ash." I stopped rocking. The chair creaked. Marcus froze. His head snapped toward the corner of the porch where I sat in the shadows. "Hello, son," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when I negotiated contracts with men who wanted to break my leg. "Dad," he squinted, trying to see past the darkness. He raised the gas can threateningly. You did this. You ruined everything." I didn't move. I just rested my hand on the cold steel of the shotgun barrel. "I didn't do anything, Marcus," I said. "I just turned the lights on. You are the one who doesn't like what he sees." He took a step up, sloshing more gas onto the wood. The fumes were overpowering now. "She left me," he screamed, tears streaming down his grime-streaked face. "Tiffany left me. She took the car. She took the last $500 I had hidden in my shoe. She is gone." "I know," I said. "I told her to leave, and I told you she was stealing from us. You didn't want to listen. You turned her against me," he yelled, swinging the heavy can. "You poisoned her mind." We were happy. We were a power couple. "And you jealous, bitter old man, you couldn't stand it. You couldn't stand seeing me successful." "Successful?" I asked. I stood up slowly, the shotgun held loosely in one hand, barrel pointed at the ground. "Marcus, you haven't paid a bill in 5 years. You haven't closed a legitimate deal in 3. You were playing dress-up in my clothes. And when the costume came off, your wife didn't like the man underneath." He shook his head violently, spraying spittle. "No, it's your fault. You humiliated me. You evicted me. You fired me. You took my life. I took your toys." "Marcus," I corrected him. "I took the things you used to hurt people." He pulled a lighter from his pocket. The flame flickered small and orange against the dark night. "I swear to God, Dad, I will do it," he sobbed, holding the lighter over the gasoline-soaked steps. "I will burn this whole place down. I will burn you. I will burn Mom. I don't care anymore." I looked at the flame. Then I looked at him. I didn't raise the gun. I didn't flinch. I just walked to the edge of the porch, putting myself between him and the front door, between him and his mother. "You think fire scares me?" I asked softly. I walked closer, stepping right into the puddle of gasoline he had poured. My boots splashed in it. "I worked in a blast furnace for 40 years, son. I have breathed air so hot it would melt the skin off your face. I have walked through fire to put food on your table." I took another step. He backed down one step, the lighter shaking in his hand. "You want to burn something? Burn it. But you better make sure you finish the job. Because if you light that fire, Marcus, you are not just burning a house. You are burning the last bridge you have on this earth." He trembled. "You hate me," he whispered. "You always hated me." I laughed. It was a sad, dry sound. "Hate you." I looked at this broken man, this shell of potential that I had coddled into oblivion. "I don't hate you, Marcus. I pity you. I love you enough to stop you from becoming a murderer." I pointed the stock of the shotgun at the door behind me. "Your mother is in there," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "The woman you slapped. The woman who prayed for you every night while you were out spending my money on strippers and gold-plated steaks. She is sleeping. And if you think for 1 second I am going to let you bring smoke and fire into her sanctuary, you have lost your mind." I took one more step. I was towering over him now. "I didn't raise you to hit your mother, Marcus, and I didn't raise you to be an arsonist." I leaned in my face, inches from his. "So go ahead. Drop the lighter. Let's see who burns first. You with your gasoline or me with my rage?" Marcus looked into my eyes. He was looking for fear. He was looking for the hesitation of a father who couldn't hurt his child. But he didn't find it. He found Isaiah Jefferson. He found the man who had stared down riots and recession. His hand shook uncontrollably. The flame flickered and died. He tried to strike it again, but his thumb wouldn't work. He looked at the gas can in his other hand like it was a foreign object. I have nowhere to go," he wailed. It was a cry of pure, childlike despair. "It's cold, Dad. It's so cold." "Then drop the can," I said. He hesitated. For a second, I thought he might swing it at me, but the fight had left him. The adrenaline that had carried him 5 miles had burned out, leaving only exhaustion and the crushing reality of his choices. His fingers opened. The red can fell to the concrete with a loud clatter, spilling the last of its contents onto the driveway. The lighter fell from his other hand. Marcus collapsed. He didn't just sit down. His legs gave out. He fell to his knees in the gasoline-soaked gravel, burying his face in his hands, and began to sob. Ugly, heaving sobs that racked his entire body. "I am sorry," he choked out. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. I don't know who I am." I looked down at him. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a heavy, aching sadness. This was my son. This broken thing at my feet was the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I engaged the safety on the shotgun and leaned it against the railing. I walked down the steps, careful not to slip in the fuel. I stood over him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I dropped it onto his shoulder. "Stand up, Marcus," I said. He looked up, snot and tears running down his face. Are you going to let me come inside?" I looked at the front door, then I looked back at him. "No," I said. "You lost that right when you picked up that can." His face fell. Then what? I pointed to the garage. "There is a hose around the back," I said. "Wash the gasoline off your hand, then keep walking." "Walking where?" "To the police station," I said. "It is 3 miles down the road. Turn yourself in." "Turn myself in for what?" "For trespassing, for attempted arson, for the fraud at the company." He stared at me, horrified. You are sending me to jail. "I am sending you to the only place where you can start over with a clean slate," I said. "If you run, you will always be looking over your shoulder. If you stay here, you will freeze. If you go there and you confess, you take responsibility. For the first time in your life, Marcus, you pay the bill." He slowly got to his feet. He looked small. He looked like a man who had been stripped of everything except the truth. Will you be there?" he asked. "I will be at the hearing," I said. "I will not bail you out. I will not hire you a fancy lawyer, but I will be there." He nodded. He wiped his face with my handkerchief. He looked at the house one last time, then he turned and walked toward the hose. I watched him wash his hands in the freezing water. Then I watched him walk down the driveway past the gate and onto the dark road. He didn't look back. I sat back down in my rocking chair. I picked up the shotgun. I would stay here all night, just in case. The smell of gasoline was still strong, but the wind was picking up. It would blow it away eventually. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. It was a hard silence, a lonely silence, but it was clean. My son was gone. The leech was gone. The monster was gone. Now only the man remained, and he had a long walk ahead of him. The peace I had bought with my shotgun and my silence did not last long. 2 days after I watched my son walk away into the darkness, the trouble he had been running from finally caught up to the house he had left behind. It was 3 in the morning when the headlights swept across my front window. I was awake, sitting in the library with a cup of lukewarm coffee, unable to sleep. A father knows when his child is in danger, even when that child has become a stranger. I had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, and now, judging by the roar of modified engines at my gate, it had hit the floor. I walked to the security monitor. 3 cars, blacked out windows. They were not parked politely. They were blocking the gate engines, idling aggressively. 4 men got out. They did not look like the sheriff's deputies or lawyers I had been dealing with. These men wore hoodies and heavy boots, and they moved with the jerky, violent energy of predators who smell blood. They did not ring the intercom. One of them, a man with a neck tattoo and a crowbar in his hand, started smashing the keypad of the electronic gate. I picked up the phone, but I did not dial 911. The police would take 15 minutes to get out here. These men would be inside in 5. And besides, the police operate on laws. Men like this operate on respect and fear. I needed a different kind of reinforcement. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It belonged to Leroy Big Tiny Washington, the former sergeant-at-arms for local 409 Steelworkers Union. "Tiny," I said when he answered. "It is Ike. I have a situation at the house. Marcus's debts have come collecting." "I am 10 minutes out," Tiny rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. "I will bring the boys." I hung up and checked the monitor. The gate was giving way. The men were shouting now, their voices carrying over the cold night air. "Open up, Jefferson. We know you in there," Marcus said. "You got the money." My blood ran cold. Marcus, of course. My son, the coward, had not just run away. He had pointed the wolves to my door to save his own skin. He had told these loan sharks, these street gamblers, that his daddy would pay the bill. He had used my life as collateral for his mistake. I walked to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped out onto the porch. I didn't bring the shotgun this time. A gun escalates things. I wanted to end this. The gate groaned and swung open. The 4 men marched up the driveway. They stopped at the bottom of the steps. The leader, the one with the crowbar, looked up at me. He was young, maybe 25, with eyes that were too wide and too shiny. He was high on something, and he was desperate. "Where is Marcus?" he spat. "He is not here," I said, my voice calm. "And neither are you. You are trespassing. Turn around and leave." The boy laughed. It was a nervous, twitchy sound. "Trespassing, old man. Your son owes us $50,000. He said you were the bank. He said you got a safe full of cash in there. So you are going to open it, or I am going to open your head with this bar." I looked at him. I looked at the 3 men behind him. They were just boys, really. Boys playing gangsters because they had never met a real man. "Marcus lied to you," I said. "I do not pay his debt, and I do not open my door to threats." The boy took a step up. He slapped the crowbar into his palm. "Listen, Grandpa, I do not care what he said. I want my money, and if I do not get it, I am going to burn this fancy house down with you inside it, and maybe we will go find that old lady in the wheelchair Marcus told us about." That was the mistake. He mentioned Beatrice. The calm that I had been holding on to evaporated. It was replaced by the cold, hard steel of 40 years in the foundry. I didn't shout. I didn't move. I just looked at him. "You just made a fatal error, son," I said softly. He sneered and raised the crowbar. "Yeah, what are you going to do? Call the cops?" "No," I said, looking past him to the end of the driveway. "I called the union." A low rumble started in the distance. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of their cheap sedans. It was the deep, deep bass thrum of heavy engine, diesel engine, V8 engine, the sound of American steel approaching. The boy turned around. Headlights appeared at the gate. Not 2, not 4, dozen. A convoy of pickup trucks, Harleys, and old sedans rolled into the driveway. They parked on the grass. They blocked the exit. They filled the space until there was nowhere to move. Doors open, engines cut, and then the men stepped out. They were not young. Most of them were over 60. Some walked with limps. Some had gray beard, but they were big men. Men who had spent their lives bending iron welding beams and building the skyscrapers these boys lived in. They wore leather jackets with Union patches. They wore Vietnam veteran hats. They held tire irons, baseball bats, and heavy wrenches in their callous hands. Leading them was Big Tiny. He was 6'7", 300 pounds of solid muscle that age hadn't soft. He walked up the driveway with a slow, terrifying purpose. The 4 thugs shrank back. They looked at the wall of old men surrounding them. There must have been 30 of them. 30 men who had survived strikes, riots, and wars. 30 men who looked at these boys like they were annoying insects. Tiny stopped next to the boy with the crowbar. He looked down at him. Tiny didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. His hands were the size of ham. "You seem lost, son," Tiny rumbled. The boy swallowed hard. We are just here for a debt. Marcus Jefferson owes us money." Tiny looked at me. "Ike, does your son owe these boys money?" "My son is gone, Tiny," I said. "These men are threatening my wife." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The 30 men took a step closer. The sound of knuckles cracking and boots shifting on gravel filled the air, threatening Beatrice. Tiny asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that was scarier than a scream. "You threaten the wife of a Union brother in his own house." The boy dropped the crowbar. It clattered loudly on the concrete. He held up his hand. "Look, man, we didn't know," Marcus said. "He said it was easy. He said the old man was weak." Tiny laughed. It sounded like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "Weak." He pointed a thick finger at me. "That man survived the explosion of '79. That man walked out of a burning factory carrying 2 men on his back. That man has more steel in his spine than you have in your whole car." Tiny leaned in close to the boy's face. "Now pick up your toy. Get in your car. And if I ever see you on this street again, if I ever hear you say the name Jefferson again, I will fold you like a lawn chair. Do you understand?" The boy nodded frantically. Yes, sir. We are leaving." They scrambled. They tripped over themselves, running back to their cars. They reversed blindly, scraping paint, desperate to get away from the silent, staring wall of the old guard. We watched them speed away, their taillights disappearing into the night. When the silence returned, the tension broke. The men relaxed. Some lit cigarettes, some laughed. Tiny walked up the steps and shook my hand. His grip was crushing. "You okay, Ike?" he asked. "I am okay, Tiny," I said. "Thank you." He looked at the empty driveway. "Marcus sent them." I nodded. "He told them I was the bank." Tiny shook his head, spitting on the ground. "That boy has lost his way, Ike. He broke the code. You do not bring wolves to your father's door." "No, you do not," I said. "Come on inside," I told the group. "Beatrice is sleeping, but I have a case of whiskey in the cellar that needs drinking, and I think we all earned a glass." We sat in the library until dawn. We drank and we told stories. We talked about the old days, about the strikes, about the men we had lost. We didn't talk about Marcus. He didn't deserve to be in the room with these men. As I looked around at their weathered faces, I realized something. This was my family. Not the bloodline that had betrayed me, but the brotherhood that had stood by me. Marcus had tried to use violence to intimidate me, but he forgot where I came from. He forgot that I was forged in fire. When the sun came up, Tiny stood to leave. "If they come back, Ike, you call," he said. "They won't be back," I said. "They know now." "Know what?" "They know that this house is protected by iron," I said. After they left, I walked out to the driveway. I picked up the crowbar the boy had left behind. It was cheap metal light and hollow, just like my son. I threw it in the trash. I went back inside to check on Beatrice. She was awake, sitting up in bed. "I heard voices," she said softly. "Was that Tiny? Yes, B," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Tiny and the boys stopped by. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said, smoothing her hair. "Just some pests. We handled it." She smiled and closed her eyes. "You always handle it, Ike." I walked to the window and looked out at the gate. Marcus had played his last card. He had tried to use fear against me. He had tried to sell me out to criminals, and in doing so, he had burned the last shred of pity I had for him. He was out there somewhere hiding, waiting to hear if his plan had worked. He was waiting to hear if I had paid his debt or if I had been hurt. He was going to be disappointed. I picked up my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to the police, not to the lawyer. I called the private investigator I had on retainer. "Find out who those boys were," I said. "Find out who they work for. And then find out where Marcus is sleeping tonight." "Why?" the investigator asked. Because I want to send him a message, I said. I want him to know that his debt has not been paid, and now the interest is due. Marcus thought he was sending wolves to eat me. He didn't realize he was just feeding the lion. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the Fulton County Superior Court wearing my best Sunday suit. It was a 3-piece charcoal wool, the kind men wore when business was serious and honor was on the line. Next to me sat Saul Silverstein, calm as a glacier, arranging his files with meticulous precision. Across the aisle sat Marcus. He looked different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery, desperate energy. He was wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right, probably bought off the rack with whatever cash he had scraped together. Next to him was his lawyer, a man named Sterling Archer, who had a reputation for being a bulldog in family court. Archer wore a flashy tie and a smile that looked like it had been surgically attacked. The courtroom was packed. Word had gotten out. The fall of the Jefferson heir was news in our community. People whispered in the pews, their eyes darting between me and my son. I saw Tiny in the back row, his arms crossed, a silent sentinel. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge William T. Vance presiding. Judge Vance walked in. He was a man my age, African-American, with hair as white as cotton and a face etched with the history of the South. He had marched in Selma. He had seen things that would make a lesser man crumble. He sat down, adjusted his glass, and looked over the rim at the assembly. Civil Action Number 249, he read. Marcus Jefferson versus Isaiah Jefferson. Petition for emergency guardianship and conservatorship of Beatrice Jefferson. He looked up. "Mr. Archer, you may proceed." Archer stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked to the center of the room, playing to the crowd. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth as oil. "We are here today because of a tragedy of a mind lost to age and paranoia. My client, Mr. Marcus Jefferson, is a devoted son. For years, he has run the family business, cared for his ailing mother, and supported his aging father. But recently, Mr. Isaiah Jefferson's behavior has become erratic, dangerous." He turned and pointed a finger at me. "He has evicted his own son without cause. He has cut off financial support to his family. He has installed military-grade surveillance in his home. And most disturbingly, he has isolated Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson, a stroke victim who cannot speak for herself, from the only child she had. We believe Mr. Isaiah is suffering from advanced dementia coupled with violent paranoid delusion. We are asking the court to grant immediate emergency guardianship of Mrs. Beatrice to her son Marcus, along with control of the family assets to ensure her continued care." Judge Vance looked at me. His expression was unreadable. Mr. Silverstein Saul stood up. He didn't walk to the center. He stayed at the table. "Your Honor," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "The defense rejects all claim. We assert that Mr. Isaiah Jefferson is of sound mind and body. We assert that the actions taken against Mr. Marcus Jefferson were not the result of paranoia, but the necessary response to gross misconduct, theft, and elder abuse." "Elder abuse," Archer laughed. "That is a serious accusation, counselor. Do you have proof? Or is this just another delusion of your client?" "I have proof," Saul said. Archer waved his hand dismissively. "We have affidavits from friends and associates stating that Marcus is a pillar of the community. We have statements from neighbors who say Isaiah has been shouting at invisible enemies. This is a clear case of senility, Your Honor. We are just trying to protect a vulnerable old woman from a husband who has lost his grip on reality." He turned to Mark. "My client loves his mother. He is heartbroken. He just wants to bring her home." Marcus wiped a fake tear from his eye. "It was a good performance. If I didn't know him, I might have believed it." Saul looked at me. I nodded. "Your Honor," Saul said, "we would like to submit Exhibit A. Surveillance footage from the Jefferson residence dated November 24th, Thanksgiving Day." Archer objected immediately. "Your Honor, we have not seen this footage. This is an ambush. It was submitted to the clerk this morning." "Mr. Archer," Judge Vance said. "Overruled. Play the tape." The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom went silent. The video was crystal clear. It showed the dining room, the table set for a feast, the guests in their finery. It showed Tiffany mocking the collard greens. It showed Beatrice spilling the water. And then it showed Mark. The entire courtroom watched as my son stood up. They saw the rage in his face. They saw him grab the napkin. And then they saw the slap. The sound of the slap, amplified by the courtroom speakers, was like a gunshot. A collective gasp went through the room. A woman in the back row cried out. Then came the clapping. Tiffany's applause echoed in the silence of the court. "Someone finally taught her a lesson." The video continued. It showed me helping Beatrice. It showed Marcus ordering me to take her away. Saul paused the video. The image on the screen was frozen on Marcus's face, twisted in ugly, violent anger, standing over his fallen mother. Judge Vance stared at the screen. He took off his glasses. He cleaned them slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Then he put them back on and looked at Marcus. His gaze was not judicial anymore. It was personal. It was the look of a man who revered his own mother looking at a man who had desecrated that bond. "Mr. Archer," Judge Vance said, his voice dangerously low. "Is that your client?" The devoted son. Archer was pale. He was shuffling papers, looking for an exit strategy that didn't exist. "Your Honor, context is key. We believe the video may be doctored." "Doctored," Judge Vance roared. He slammed his hand on the bench. "Do not insult my intelligence, counselor. I see a man striking a disabled woman. I see a son assaulting his mother." He turned to Marcus. "Stand up, Mr. Jefferson." Marcus stood up. His legs were shaking. He He looked at the judge, then at the screen, then at the floor. Look at me, Judge Vance commanded. Marcus looked up. In my courtroom, Judge Vance said we respect our elders. In my culture, we honor our mothers. You are a disgrace. You come in here asking for guardianship. You come in here calling your father crazy. The only crazy thing in this room is the audacity you have to show your face in public after doing that. I didn't, Marcus stammered. Silence, the judge bellowed. He turned to Saul. Mr. Silverstein, does your client wish to press charge? We have already filed a report with the sheriff, Your Honor, Saul said. Assault, elder abuse, domestic violence. Good, Judge Vance said. He looked back at Marcus. Petition for guardianship denied. Petition for conservatorship denied. But, Your Honor, Archer tried to intervene. Sit down, counselor, or I will hold you in contempt, Judge Vance snapped. He took a deep breath, composing himself. Mr. Marcus Jefferson, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. You are to come nowhere near Beatrice Jefferson or Isaiah Jefferson. Not within 500 feet. Not within 5 miles if I could enforce it. If you violate this order, you will go to jail. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus whispered. And furthermore, Judge Vance continued, I am forwarding this video to the district attorney's office with a recommendation for immediate prosecution. You didn't just lose a civil case today, son. You opened the door to a prison cell. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. Get out of my sight. The courtroom erupted. People were shouting. Reporters were rushing to the aisle. Marcus stood there frozen. He looked at me across the aisle. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him with the same flat, hard stare I had given him the night he tried to burn my house down. You did this, he mouthed. I nodded. Yes, I did. He turned and ran. He pushed past his lawyer, past the bailiff, and ran out of the courtroom a pariah in his own hometown. Saul closed his briefcase. Well, Ike, he said. That went well. I looked at the empty doorway where my son had fled. It is not over, Saul, I said. He still hasn't learned. He is scared, but he isn't sorry. Not yet, Saul agreed. But he will be. We walked out of the courthouse together. Tiny and the Union boys were waiting on the steps. They formed a wall around me as we walked to the car, shielding me from the cameras and the question. Good job, Ike, Tiny said, clapping me on the shoulder. Thanks, Tiny. I got in the car. I felt tired. It is a heavy thing destroying your own son. It takes a piece of your soul with it. But then I thought about Beatrice. I thought about the peace in her eyes this morning. I thought about the bruise that was finally fading from her cheek, and I knew I would do it again. 1,000 times, because a man protects his wife, even from his own blood. 2 days after the court hearing, I received a call from the hospital. Beatrice had suffered a minor setback. The stress of the trial, the raw emotion of seeing her son in that courtroom had taken its toll. It wasn't another stroke, thank God, but her blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and the doctors wanted to keep her for observation. I sat by her bedside in the private room I had insisted on. The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beep of the monitor. Beatrice was awake, her eyes open and clear, staring at the ceiling. She looked frail against the white sheets, a small, fragile bird caught in a storm. I held her hand, tracing the veins on the back of it with my thumb. How are you feeling, Bae? I asked softly. She turned her head slowly to look at me. Her gaze was intense, focused. I want to see him, she whispered. Her voice was weak, but the words were distinct. See who I asked, though I knew the answer. Marcus, she said. I need to see my son. I hesitated. The restraining order was in place. Marcus wasn't allowed within 500 feet of her, and frankly, I didn't want him anywhere near her. I didn't want him to upset her again. B, I said gently. The judge said no. It is not safe. He is not in a good place right now. I know, she said, but I need to say something to him. Something I should have said a long time ago. Please, Ike, make it happen. Just for 5 minutes. I looked into her eyes. I saw a determination there that I hadn't seen in years. It was the same look she had when she marched with me during the strikes, holding a sign and defying the company goon. It was the look of a woman who had made up her mind. I couldn't say no to her. Not now. Not ever. I will call Saul, I said. We will arrange it, but I will be right there, and the security guards will be right outside the door. She nodded. Thank you. It took 3 hours to arrange. Saul had to get a special dispensation from the judge, citing compassionate ground. Marcus's lawyer had to be notified. The hospital security had to be briefed. When Marcus arrived, he looked like a ghost. He was wearing the same ill-fitting suit he had worn to court, now wrinkled and stained. His eyes were bloodshot, sunken into his skull. He walked with a shuffle, his head down, defeated. He stopped at the door of the hospital room. He looked at me. I was standing guard, my arms crossed. 5 minutes, Marcus, I said. And if you raise your voice, if you make one threatening move, I will end you myself. He nodded, not meeting my eyes. I just want to see Mom, he whispered. I opened the door and let him in. I followed him, standing by the window, watching every move. Beatrice was propped up on pillows. She watched him walk toward the bed. She didn't smile. She didn't reach out her arm. She just watched him. Marcus stopped at the foot of the bed. He looked at her and his face crumpled. He fell to his knees, burying his face in the sheets near her feet. Mom, he sobbed. Mom, I am so sorry. I do not know what happened. I was stressed. I was angry. I did not mean to hit you. Please, Mom. Please forgive me. I need you. I have no one else. Dad kicked me out. Tiffany left me. Everyone hates me, but you always loved me. You always forgave me. Please, Mom, tell Dad to stop this. Tell him to let me come home." He cried like a child, begging for comfort, begging for the safety of his mother's love. He thought this was it. He thought this was the moment of redemption. He thought his mother, the woman who had always shielded him from my discipline, the woman who had slipped him money when I cut him off, would save him one last time. Beatrice let him cry for a moment. She let him pour out his excuses and his self-pity. Then she spoke. "Stand up, Marcus." Her voice was not weak anymore. It was firm. It was the voice of the matriarch. Marcus looked up, startled. He slowly got to his feet, wiping his eyes. "Mom," he asked, hopeful. Beatrice looked at him. She looked at his face, the face she had washed when he was a baby, the face she had kissed when he was hurt. "I have loved you for 38 years, Marcus," she said. "I loved you before I saw you. I loved you when you were colicky and cried all night. I loved you when you broke my favorite vase playing ball in the house. I loved you when you failed your classes. I loved you when you stole money from my purse to buy video games." She took a breath, her chest rising and falling slowly. "I forgave you every time," she continued. "I told your father to be patient. I told him you were just finding your way. I defended you when you were lazy. I defended you when you were arrogant. I thought my love was enough to make you a good man." She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. They were dry. There were no tears left in Beatrice Jefferson. "But I was wrong," she said. "My love did not make you good. It made you weak. It made you entitled, and it made you cruel." "Mom, no." Marcus started to protest. "Be quiet," she snapped. "I am speaking." Marcus flinched. He had never heard her raise her voice like that. "You hit me, Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that filled the room. "You looked at me, your own mother, a crippled woman in a wheelchair, and you struck me across the face because I spilled a glass of water." She touched her cheek where the bruise had finally faded. "That slap did not just hurt my face, Marcus. It broke something inside me. It broke the hope I had for you. It broke the belief that deep down you were still my sweet boy." She looked at him with a gaze that was completely devoid of warmth. "A man who hits his mother is not a man," she said, "and he is not a son." Marcus stared at her, his mouth open. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I am done, Marcus," she said. "I have no more forgiveness to give. The well is dry. You drained it." She turned her head away from him, looking out the window at the gray sky. "Do not call me Mom anymore," she said. "Mrs. Jefferson will be fine." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a cord being cut, the final, severing snap of the bond between mother and child. Marcus stood there frozen. He looked at her back. He looked at me. He looked around the room, searching for something, anything to hold on to. But there was nothing. He had destroyed it all. For the first time, the reality of his situation truly hit him. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the house. He had lost the one person in the world who had loved him unconditionally. He had lost his sanctuary. He let out a sound, a low, keening noise that was more animal than human. He reached out a hand toward her but stopped. He knew he couldn't touch her. He knew he had lost that right forever. "Please," he whispered. "Go," Beatrice said, not looking at him. "Just go." I stepped forward. I opened the door. "Time is up, Marcus," I said. He looked at me with hollow eye. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. She did not mean it," he mumbled. "She is sick. She is confused. She is the clearest she has been in years," I said. "Goodbye, son." Marcus walked out of the room. He walked like an old man, his shoulders slumped, his feet dragging. He walked down the hospital corridor, past the nurse's station, past the security guards, and out the automatic door. I watched him go. I closed the door and went back to Beatrice's bedside. She was still looking out the window. Her hand was resting on the sheet still. I sat down and took her hand. It was cold. "Did I do the right thing, Ike?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You did the bravest thing I have ever seen, Bea," I said. "You told the truth." She turned to look at me. A single tear escaped her eye and rolled down her cheek. "It hurts, Ike," she whispered. "It hurts so much." "I know, baby," I said, wiping the tear away. "I know, but the pain means it was real. And now we can heal." We sat there in silence for a long time, holding hands, two old soldiers who had won the war but lost the peace. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and red. It was the end of the day. And for Marcus, it was the beginning of a very long, very dark night. He was alone now, truly alone, and he had no one to blame but himself. The phone call I had been waiting for came at 3 in the morning. It rang through the silence of the mansion like a church bell signaling a funeral. I was awake, sitting in my leather chair in the library, staring into the dying embers of the fire. I picked up the receiver on the first ring. It was Agent Vance from the Insurance Investigation Unit. His voice was crisp, professional, and devoid of emotion, exactly what I paid for. He told me they had her. Tiffany had been picked up at a truck stop pawn shop just 2 miles from the Alabama border. She had tried to sell one of the diamond earrings, the smaller ones that Beatrice wore on Sunday. The pawnbroker, alerted by the database flag I had activated, triggered a silent alarm the moment he ran the serial number. When the state troopers arrived, they found the rest of my wife's jewelry jewelry stuffed inside a fast food bag in the passenger seat of the stolen Honda Civic. I thanked Vance and hung up. I did not smile. This was not a happy occasion. It was simply the inevitable conclusion of a series of bad choices made by a woman who thought she was smarter than the consequence. I stood up, my knees popping in the quiet room, and walked to the window. Outside, the night was black and cold. Somewhere out there in the dark, my daughter-in-law was sitting in a holding cell, realizing that her life as she knew it was over. But the night was not done with the Jefferson family. There was one more player who needed to make his move. I knew Tiffany would make one phone call. She had no friends left. Her trainer Chad had blocked her number the moment I threatened to expose it. Her parents had washed their hands of her years ago. There was only one person she could call. One person she thought she could still manipulate. My son, Marcus. I drove to the county sheriff's station. I did not go to the front desk. I went to the back entrance where Sheriff Deptford was waiting for me. He led me into the observation room, a small airless box that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. Through the one-way glass, I could see the interrogation room. Tiffany was handcuffed to the table. She looked nothing like the polished socialite who had sneered at my wife's cooking. Her hair was matted. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks in dark streaks, and she was shivering in her thin sweater. She looked small. She looked terrified. But even in her terror, I could see the wheels turning in her eyes. She was planning her next lie. The door to the interrogation room opened. A deputy walked in, followed not by a lawyer, but by Marcus. My son looked like a man who had walked through hell. He was wearing the same suit he had been evicted in, but it was now stained and wrinkled. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were hollow, sunken deep into his skull. He looked 20 years older than he had a week ago. He walked with a limp, perhaps from sleeping on the floor of that cheap motel, or perhaps from the weight of the shame he was carrying. When Tiffany saw him, she lit up. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She burst into fresh tears, straining against the handcuffs. "Baby," she wailed. "Oh, thank God. Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is all a mistake. Your father set me up. He planted those diamonds. You know I would never steal. Please, Mark, tell them. Tell them who I am. Bail me out. We can fix this. We can go away together." Marcus stood by the door. He did not rush to her side. He did not comfort her. He just stared at her. His face was unreadable, a mask of exhaustion and bitterness. The detective sitting in the corner looked up. "Mr. Jefferson, are you here to post bail for your wife?" Marcus looked at the detective, then back at Tiffany. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, Tiffany's eyes gleamed with hope. She thought he was reaching for a checkbook. She thought he was reaching for salvation. Instead, Marcus pulled out a thick, crumpled envelope. I recognized it. It was the packet of evidence I had sent him. The photos of the affair, the bank statements, and the loan documents she had forged. "No," Marcus said, his voice raspy and dry. "I am not here to bail her out." Tiffany's smile faltered. "What, Marcus? What are you saying? Do not let your father brainwash you. I love you." Marcus walked to the table. He did not sit down. He slammed the envelope onto the metal surface. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small room. "You love me?" he asked, his voice rising. "Is that why you slept with Chad in a hotel room paid for with my company card? Is that why you told your friends you were waiting for my parents to die?" Tiffany turned pale. She looked at the envelope, then at Marcus. "Marcus, listen, I was lonely. You were always working. It meant nothing." "Shut up!" Marcus screamed. It was a raw, primal sound. He leaned over the table, his hands gripping the edge until his knuckles turned white. "I lost everything for you, Tiffany. I lost my job. I lost my house. I lost my father. I hit my mother because I was trying to impress you, because I wanted to be the man you wanted, and the whole time you were stealing from me." He opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. He shoved them toward the detective. "Officer, I want to file a report," Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. "This woman, my wife, forged my signature on 3 separate bank loans totaling $200,000. She took out credit lines in my name without my consent. She embezzled funds from the company accounts I was managing." The detective raised an eyebrow and picked up the papers. He looked at Tiffany. "Is this true, ma'am?" Tiffany's face twisted. The mask of the victim fell away, replaced by the face of a cornered animal. She realized the game was up. Marcus wasn't her savior anymore. He was her executioner. "He is lying," she shrieked, lunging at him as far as the cuffs would allow. "He knew about everything. He spent that money too. He bought the suit. He bought the dinners. He is just trying to save his own skin." "I did not sign those loans," Marcus yelled back. "I did not know you were siphoning money into a secret account." "You are pathetic," Tiffany spat at him. "A weak, pathetic little boy playing CEO. You think your daddy is going to take you back now? You think because you snitched on me he is going to open the gates? He hates you, Marcus. He hates you more than he hates me. I do not care," Marcus shouted, tears streaming down his face now. "I just want you to pay. I want you to rot in here. You took my life, Tiffany. You took everything." The two of them screamed at each other, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of hate and blame. They were like two rats rats in a bucket tearing each other apart to survive. It was ugly. It was visceral. And it was exactly what needed to happen. I watched from behind the glass. I watched the son I had raised and the woman he had chosen destroy whatever was left of their bond. There was no love there. There never had been. It was a transaction that had gone bankrupt. The detective stood up and signaled to the guard. "Get him out of here." Marcus was escorted out, still shouting accusation. Tiffany was left alone, heaving her eyes wild, realizing that she had just lost her last lifeline. She slumped in the chair, defeated. I turned away from the glass. Sheriff Deptford was standing by the door, his arms crossed. "That was hard to watch, Ike," he said quietly. "It was necessary," I replied. I walked out into the hallway. Marcus was sitting on a bench, his head in his hand. He looked up when he saw me. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. "Did you see?" he asked, his voice dull. I told them. I gave them the proof. "I saw," I said. Does it change anything?" he asked, looking at me with a glimmer of hope that broke my heart. I looked at him. I saw the desperation. I saw the realization of what he had done. But I also saw the man who had slapped Beatrice. I saw the man who had tried to burn down my house. One act of truth did not erase years of lie. It changes the charges against you, I said. With that evidence, you might avoid prison for the fraud. The police will see you were a victim of identity theft for the loan, but it does not change the past, Marcus. He dropped his head again. "I have nothing, Dad." She took the car. "I have no money. I have nowhere to sleep." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small card. It was a business card for a shelter downtown, a place run by the church I had attended for 40 years. "They have a bed for you," I said. I called ahead. "They know you are coming. It is warm. They have food. And they have a program for men who want to rebuild their lives." He took the card. He stared at it. "A homeless shelter. You are sending me to a homeless shelter. I am sending you to a place where you can start over," I said, "without my money, without Tiffany's poison, just you and God." He stood up. He looked at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to throw the card in my face. But then he nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "Oh." He turned and walked toward the exit. He walked with a limp, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum. He pushed open the doors and stepped out into the cold morning air. I watched him go. I felt a heavy weight in my chest, the weight of a father who has to let his child fall so he can learn to stand. I went back into the station to sign the paperwork for the return of the jewelry. The detective handed me the bag. I opened it. There they were, the stars, Beatrice's diamond. They were cold to the touch, but they sparkled under the harsh fluorescent lights. I drove home as the sun was coming up. The sky was painting itself in shades of purple and orange. I walked into the house and went straight to the sunroom. Beatrice was awake. She was looking out the window. I pulled the velvet box from my pocket. I opened it. "I told you I would bring them back," I said softly. She looked at the diamonds, then at me. She smiled and tears filled her eyes. "They are beautiful, Ike," she said, "but you look tired." "I am I said. "I am very tired." But the house was quiet. The thieves were gone. The liars were exposed, and my wife was safe. I sat down in the chair next to her and closed my eyes. The war was over. Now we just had to survive the peace. The morning sun was bright, piercing through the cold winter air as I helped Beatrice into the passenger seat of my truck. It was a struggle for her movements still slow and stiff from the stroke, but she refused the wheelchair ramp I had installed. She wanted to walk even if it was just 3 steps. I watched her grit her teeth, her determination a silent fire that warmed my heart. She was a fighter. She always had been. Unlike the son we had raised, she did not look for the easy way out. She looked for the way through. "Where are we going, Ike?" she asked, her voice raspy but clear. "You are wearing your good tie." I smoothed the silk tie against my chest. It was the one she had given me for my 60th birthday. "I am taking you to see something something I have been working on for 5 years, something I never told you about." She looked at me, her eyebrows raised. "You have secrets, Isaiah Jefferson." "I have surprises," I corrected. We drove out of the city, leaving the gated community and the skyscrapers behind. We headed north toward the rolling hills where the old steel mills used to be. The landscape changed from manicured lawns to pine forests and open fields. I drove in silence, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Today was the day. The day I revealed the final piece of the puzzle. The day I hammered the last nail into the coffin of Marcus's arrogance. We pulled off the highway onto a freshly paved road. A large sign covered in a white tarp stood at the entrance. I drove past it, the tires humming on the smooth asphalt. The road wound through the trees for a mile until the forest opened up. Beatrice gasped. In front of us, rising from the green earth like a modern cathedral, was a massive structure of glass and steel. It curved gently, mimicking the flow of the river that ran behind it. It was 4 stories tall with manicured gardens, walking paths, and a fountain that shot water high into the air. It looked like a 5-star resort, but it wasn't. "Ike," she whispered. "What is this?" I stopped the truck in front of the main entrance. I got out, walked around, and helped her down. I settled her into her wheelchair and pushed her toward the double glass door. "This," I said, pushing the button to open the doors, "is the reason I worked double shifts. This is the reason I didn't buy new cars every year. This is where the money went." We rolled into the lobby. It was an atrium flooded with natural light. The floors were polished terrazzo. The walls were lined with art. Doctors and nurses in crisp crisp blue scrubs were moving about carrying clipboards, checking equipment. They stopped when they saw us. They smiled. They knew who we were. A tall man in a white coat approached us. He looked familiar. It was Dr. Aris, the neurologist who had treated Beatrice when she first had her stroke. Mr. Jefferson, Dr. Aris said, shaking my hand warmly. Mrs. Jefferson, welcome. We are ready for the grand opening next week. Beatrice looked from the doctor to me, confusion clouding her eyes. Grand opening. Ike, tell me what is going on. I knelt beside her chair. I took her hand. When you had your stroke, B, I saw how hard it was. I saw the waiting list. I saw the mediocre care. I saw how they treated old folks like expired inventory. I swore then that no one else would have to go through that. Not if I could help it. I pointed to the brass plaque on the wall behind the reception desk. It was covered by a small velvet curtain. I nodded to Dr. Aries. He stepped forward and pulled the cord. The curtain fell. The brass shone under the lights. The Beatrice Jefferson Center for Rehabilitation and Neurological Recovery. Beatrice covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. Me, she choked out. You named it after me. It is yours, Bea, I said. It is a $50 million facility, state-of-the-art robotics, hydrotherapy, the best specialists in the country. It is fully funded. It is a non-profit. No one gets turned away because they cannot pay. She reached out and touched the plaque tracing her name. $50 million. Ike, we are just simple people. We were simple people who worked hard, I said. And we were blessed, and I wanted to bless others. I stood up and looked around the magnificent lobby. But there is something else you need to know, B. What she asked, looking up at me. I built this for you, I said. But I built it for Marcus, too. Her face fell at the mention of his name. Marcus? Yes. I had a plan. A foolish, fatherly plan. I was going to give this to him. Not to own, but to run. I wanted him to be the executive director. I wanted him to have a job that meant something. A job where he had to help people, not just exploit them. I thought if I gave him a legacy of service, it might change him. It might make him the man I knew he could be. I looked at the empty office behind the reception desk. The office with the mahogany desk and the view of the garden. That was supposed to be his office. I was going to surprise him on Christmas, I said, my voice hardening. I was going to hand him the keys. I was going to tell him, son, this is your chance. This is your empire. But it is an empire of care, not greed. You will draw a salary, a good one, but you will answer to a board and you will serve the patient. Beatrice looked at the office, then back at me. But he hit me, she whispered. Yes, I said. He hit you. And in that 1 second, he didn't just break your heart. He burned down his future. I turned to Dr. Aris. Doctor, is the board of directors fully assembled? Yes, sir, Dr. Aris said. Good. Inform them that the position of executive director will not be filled by a family member. We will be hiring a professional, someone with a heart, someone who knows the value of a human life. I looked back at Beatrice. It belongs to the community now, B. Marcus will never step foot in this building. He will never sign a check here. He will never sit in that chair. He traded a $50 million legacy for a moment of anger and a wife who hated us. Beatrice nodded slowly. She wiped her tears. It is better this way, Ike, she said softly. He would have ruined it. He would have turned it into something ugly. I know, I said. I know. We spent the rest of the afternoon touring the facility. We watched patients learning to walk again. We saw the pool where water therapy eased old joints. We saw the garden where stroke victims relearned how to plant flowers. It was a place of hope. It was a place of healing, and it was the only thing I had ever built that truly mattered. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in a world that was gray and cold, my son was waking up. Marcus was sitting on the bottom bunk of a bed in the homeless shelter. The room smelled of unwashed bodies and despair. He was wearing a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt that had been donated by a stranger. His expensive suit was gone ruined by the rain and the street. He had a job now. He was a dishwasher at a diner 3 blocks away. It paid minimum wage. It was hard, hot, wet work. His hands, once manicured and soft, were now red and chapped. It was his break time. He sat on a crate in the alley behind the diner smoking a cigarette he had bummed from the cook. He was tired. His back ached. His feet were swollen. A gust of wind blew a newspaper across the alley. It fluttered and stuck against his wet boot. Marcus looked down. He didn't want to read it. He didn't care about the world anymore. The world had chewed him up and spit him out. But the headline caught his eye. It was bold. It was big. And it had his last name in it. Local steel magnate Isaiah Jefferson donates $50 million medical center to city. Marcus froze. He reached down and peeled the wet newspaper off his shoe. His hand shook as he held it up to the dim light of the street lamp. There was a picture. It was a picture of me and Beatrice standing in front of the massive glass building. Beatrice was smiling. I looked serious, proud. He read the article. His eyes scanned the lines frantically. Isaiah Jefferson, retired union leader and quiet investor, revealed today the Beatrice Jefferson Center, a state-of-the-art facility, fully funded endowment, valued at over $50 million. Marcus stopped breathing. $50 million. He read on. When asked about the management of the new center, Mr. Jefferson stated, "I had originally intended for this to be a family legacy run by my son. However, recent events have made it clear that the stewardship of such a vital community asset requires a level of character and integrity that cannot be inherited. It must be earned. Therefore, the center will be placed in a public trust managed by an independent board." The newspaper slipped from Marcus's fingers. It fell back into the mud. He stared at the brick wall opposite him. He felt a physical blow to his stomach harder than any punch. $50 million. An empire. A legacy. A position of respect, power, and honor. It had been his. It had been waiting for him. All he had to do was be a decent human being. All he had to do was treat his mother with respect. All he had to do was not be a monster. He thought about the slap. He thought about the sound of his hand hitting his mother's face. He thought about Tiffany clapping. He had traded $50 million for a clap. He had traded a kingdom for a moment of petty, violent control. A sound escaped his throat. It was a laugh, but it sounded like a sob. He doubled over, clutching his stomach. The irony was so heavy it threatened to crush him. He was scrubbing plates for $7 an hour, scraping half-eaten food into the trash while his father was giving away millions. He realized then that I wasn't just rich, I was a titan. And he realized that he had never known me at all. He had looked at my old truck and my calloused hands and seen a simpleton. He hadn't seen the architect of his entire life. He looked at his red-chapped hand. He looked at the dirty alley. "You idiot," he whispered to himself. "You absolute idiot." He slid down the wall until he was sitting in the dirt. He put his head in his hands and wept. He didn't cry for the money. He cried because for the first time he saw the magnitude of his failure. He saw the size of the hole he had dug, and he knew with a terrifying certainty that he would never climb out of it. Not to the heights could have. Back at the center, I stood by the window of what would have been his office. I watched the sun go down over the tree. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, the ghost of the son I had lost. But then I looked down at the garden where Beatrice was laughing with a nurse pointing at a cardinal in the tree. I turned away from the window and walked out of the office. I closed the door. I locked it. The office would wait for a new occupant, someone worthy. As for Marcus, he had his own office now. It was in front of a sink full of dirty dishes. And maybe, just maybe, in the steam and the grease, he would find something I couldn't give him. He would find himself. 6 months had passed since I watched the ribbon fall on the Beatrice Jefferson Center. 6 months of quiet. 6 months of peace. The summer heat had settled over Atlanta, thick and humid, turning the air into a heavy blanket that smelled of asphalt and pine needles. My life had found a new rhythm. I spent my mornings at the center watching miracles happen in the physical therapy wing, and my afternoons on the porch with Beatrice watching the cardinals build nests in the oak tree. We were happy. We were healing. But there was a ghost that still walked through my thoughts when the house got too quiet. A ghost named Marcus. I hadn't heard from him. Not a call, not a letter. The private investigator I kept on a low retainer sent me monthly reports, brief and clinical. Subject is residing at the Parkway Motor Inn. Subject was evicted for non-payment. Subject is currently residing in a basement apartment on 4th Street. Subject is employed as a general laborer. I read them, filed them, and burned them. I didn't tell Beatrice. She didn't ask. We had an unspoken agreement that the name Marcus belonged to the past, like a war we had survived but didn't want to discuss. One Tuesday, I found myself downtown for a meeting with the city zoning board regarding an expansion for the center's parking lot. After the meeting, I felt a hunger that salads and smoothies couldn't satisfy. I wanted real food. I wanted grease. I wanted the kind of food that sticks to your rib and reminds you of where you came from. I drove my truck to a small diner on the edge of the industrial district, a place called Mel. It wasn't the kind of place Marcus would have ever set foot in during his CEO day. The floors were linoleum, the booths were cracked red vinyl, and the menu was laminated and sticky. It was the kind of place where men with dirt under their fingernails ate lunch in silence. I walked in and took a booth in the back corner. The place was busy. The clatter of silverware and the hiss of the grill filled the air. A waitress named Darlene, who had been working there since I was a foreman at the mill, poured me a cup of black coffee without asking. "Good to see you, Ike," she said, popping her gum. The usual, Darlene," I said. "Catfish and grits. And keep the coffee coming." I sat there watching the room. I saw young men in construction vests laughing over burgers. I saw old men reading newspapers. It felt good. It felt real. It was a world away from the country clubs and boardrooms Marcus had tried so hard to belong to. The lunch rush was heavy. The busboys were running back and forth, clearing tables, wiping down spills, their faces shiny with sweat. I watched them with a critical eye. I respect labor. I respect the hustle. There is a dignity in clearing a table well and making a space clean for the next person. Then I saw him. He came out of the kitchen swinging doors, carrying a gray plastic tub filled with dirty dishes. He was wearing a white apron that was stained with tomato sauce and grease. He wore a hairnet. His head was down, his shoulders hunched, trying to make himself as small as possible. It was Marcus. I froze my coffee cup halfway to my mouth. He looked terrible. He had lost weight maybe maybe 30 pounds. His face was gaunt, the skin clinging tight to his cheekbone. The expensive haircut was gone, replaced by a buzz cut that he probably did himself in a bathroom mirror. But it was his hands that caught my eye. They were red raw and chapped the skin, peeling from hours in hot water and harsh chemicals. They were the hands of a working man. He didn't see me. He was too busy. He moved to the table next to mine, which had just been vacated by a group of rowdy truckers. He started stacking the plates, scraping the leftovers into his tub. He moved with a mechanical efficiency, but there was no pride in it. There was only exhaustion. One of the truckers had left a mess. Ketchup smeared on the table, spilled soda dripping onto the seat. Marcus pulled a gray rag from his apron and started to scrub. He scrubbed hard, his jaw tight. "Hey boy," a customer at the counter yelled. "We need water over here." Marcus flinched. He didn't look up. "Just a minute," he mumbled. I watched my son, the man who used to scream at waiters for bringing the wrong vintage of wine, now scrubbing ketchup off a cheap table for minimum wage. I watched the man who had slapped his mother because she spilled water, now cleaning up the spills of strangers. It was a punishment fitting of the Old Testament. He finished the table and turned to head back to the kitchen. As he turned, his eyes swept across the room, and they landed on me. He stopped. The tub of dirty dishes shook in his hands. The silverware clattered. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The noise of the diner seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in a bubble of silence. I saw the shame hit him like a physical blow. His face flushed a deep, painful red. He looked around, looking for an exit, looking for a hole to crawl into, but there was nowhere to go. He was trapped in his apron and his reality. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I just looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised and the stranger he had become. He took a step back, almost dropping the tub. He looked like he wanted to run back into the kitchen and hide in the dish pit. I raised my hand, just one finger, a summons. "Come here," I said. My voice was low, but in the silence between us it sounded like a command from God. Marcus hesitated. He looked at the kitchen door, his sanctuary of steam and noise. Then he looked back at me. He swallowed hard. Slowly dragging his feet like a man walking to the gallows, he walked over to my booth. He stood there, clutching the tub of dirty dishes against his chest like a shield. The smell of old food and wet sponge wafted off him. "Hello, Dad," he whispered. He couldn't meet my eye. He stared at the salt shaker on the table. "Hello, Marcus," I said. He shifted his weight. I work here now." "I see that," I said. "I am the dishwasher," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush of humiliation. "But sometimes I bust tables when it gets busy. It is a job." "Yes," I said. "It is a job." There was an awkward silence. Darlene came by with my catfish. She looked at Marcus, then at me. "Everything okay here, Ike?" she asked, eyeing Marcus's dirty apron. "This guy bothering you?" Marcus flinched. He waited for me to denounce him. He waited for me to tell Darlene that this smelly busboy was my disappointment of a son. "No, Darlene," I said, keeping my eyes on Marcus. "Everything is fine. He is just cleaning up." Darlene nodded and walked away. Marcus let out a breath he had been holding. "Thank you," he murmured. "Why are you thanking me?" I asked. For not telling her." I picked up my fork and cut a piece of the catfish. I took a bite. It was perfectly fried, hot, and crispy. "I didn't do it for you, Marcus," I said, chewing slowly. "I did it because I want to eat my lunch in peace." He nodded, his face falling again. "Right, of course." He stood there for another second, awkward and miserable. I should get back to work," he said. "The manager, he yells if we stand around." "Wait," I said. He stopped. "Put the tub down," I said. He looked confused, but he set the heavy tub on the empty seat opposite me. "Look at the table," I said, pointing to the spot he had just cleaned next to us. He looked at the red vinyl boot. "You missed a spot," I said. "Right there in the corner. There is still grease on it." Marcus looked at the spot. He pulled out his rag. "Oh," he said. "Sorry, I will get it." He leaned over and scrubbed the spot. He scrubbed it until the vinyl squeaked. He wiped it dry. He checked it twice. "Is that better?" he asked, looking at me like a child seeking approval for a drawing. I looked at the table. It was clean. "Better," I said. He picked up the tub again. His hands were shaking. "Dad," he started, his voice cracked. I miss you. I miss Mom. I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything. I sleep in a basement. I have nothing. Please." He stopped. He saw the look on my face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hate. It was a wall of stone that he had built brick by brick. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my money clip. I peeled off a single $100 bill. It was crisp and new. Benjamin Franklin stared up at us. I placed the bill on the edge of the table. Marcus stared at the money. It was probably more than he made in 2 days of scrubbing pots. His eyes watered. He reached for it, his hand trembling. "Take it," I said. His fingers touched the bill. "But before you take it," I said, "listen to me." He froze his fingers on the money. "This is not a gift, Marcus," I said, "and it is not charity." I looked him dead in the eye. I wanted him to remember this moment for the rest of his life. I wanted it to burn into his soul. "I am tipping you," I said, "because you cleaned the table." I leaned forward. "Do you remember when you were 12, I asked. "Do you remember when I made you wash the truck before I let you go to the movies?" He nodded, a tear slipping down his nose. "Yes." "Do you remember what I told you?" I asked. he sniffled. You said if a job is worth doing, finish it, I commanded. It is worth doing, right? He whispered. I nodded. Clean it well, Marcus, I said, my voice hard and flat. That is the first lesson I ever taught you, and it seems you finally started listening. I picked up my coffee cup and took a sip. Now take the money and get back to the kitchen. You have dishes to wash. Marcus took the bill. He clenched it in his raw red fist. He looked at me one last time. He looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe beg, maybe scream, but he didn't. He saw the truth in my eyes. He saw that the bank of Dad was closed forever, but the school of life was in session. He nodded. Thank you, sir, he whispered. He turned and walked back to the kitchen. He pushed through the swinging doors and disappeared into the steam and the noise. I finished my catfish. I drank my coffee. I paid my bill at the counter and left a generous tip for Darlene. As I walked out to my truck, I looked back at the diner. Through the window, I could see the silhouette of a man in the back, bent over a sink, scrubbing a pan with a fury that looked a lot like repentance. I didn't feel happy. A father is never happy to see his son on his knees, but I felt satisfied. Marcus was finally learning. He was learning that respect isn't inherited. It is earned one clean plate at a time. I started the truck and drove home to Beatrice. I had a story to tell her. A story about a boy who was finally becoming a man the hard way. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning Beatrice loved best. The sun was just starting to climb over the Georgia pines, painting the sky in soft hues of lavender and peat. I woke up before the alarm just like I had for 40 years. I turned over to kiss her cheek to wake her up for her medicine and her oatmeal. But when my lips touched her skin, it was cool. Not the cold of winter, but the cool of a stone that has been resting in the shade. Her chest was still. Her face was smoothed of all the pain and the worry that the stroke had etched there. She looked like a girl again. She looked like the Beatrice I had met at the Union Dance in 1971, wearing a blue dress and a shy smile. I did not scream. I did not shake her. I knew what death looked like. I had seen it in the factory, and I had seen it in Vietnam. I simply laid my head on the pillow next to hers. I took her hand, which was already stiffening, and I held it against my chest. I lay there for an hour just listening to the silence of the house. The silence was different now. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was empty. It was the sound of a world that had lost its music. When I finally called Dr. Aris, he came within 20 minutes. He confirmed what I already knew. Massive cardiac arrest in her sleep. She didn't feel a thing. Ike told me, his hand on my shoulder. She just drifted away. I nodded. That was good. She deserved peace. She had fought enough battles in this life. She had fought for her health. She had fought for her dignity. And God help us, she had fought for her son. The next 3 days were a blur of logistics that felt like walking through underwater current. The house filled up with flowers. Lilies mostly because everyone knew they were her favorite. The phone rang off the hook. Tiny and the Union boys came over and sat on the porch keeping a vigil like royal guard. Mrs. Eudora cried in the kitchen while she baked enough ham and cornbread to feed an army. But there was one phone call I did not make, and there was one phone call I did not receive. I knew Marcus would hear about it. It was on the news. The wife of the local philanthropist Isaiah Jefferson has passed away. I knew he would read it in a discarded newspaper or hear it on the radio in the kitchen of that diner. I waited to see if he would come to the house. I waited to see if he would try to breach the gate to say goodbye to the mother he had broken. He never came. The funeral was held at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, the same church where we were married, and the same church where we had Marcus baptized. The pews were packed. It seemed like half of Atlanta was there. There were doctors from the new medical center. There were men I had worked with on the blast furnace floor. There were neighbors and city council members. The casket was closed. It was made of mahogany polished to a mirror shine, covered in a blanket of white roses. I stood at the front right next to it. I was wearing my black suit, the one Beatrice had picked out for me years ago. I stood straight. I didn't lean on my cane. I owed her that strength. The choir was singing Amazing Grace. Their voices rose up to the rafters, sweet and mournful. I looked at the front row, the space reserved for family. It was empty. Technically, I had a son. Technically, there was a man walking this earth who carried half her DNA. But looking at that empty bench, I realized that biology is the devastating lie we tell ourselves to feel less alone. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And then the heavy oak doors at the back of the church creaked open. I didn't turn around, but I felt the shift in the room. The singing didn't stop, but the heads turned. A murmur rippled through the congregation like wind through a wheat field. I looked up. Walking down the center aisle was a man who looked like a shadow of my son. Marcus was wearing a black suit, but it wasn't one of his Italian custom fits. It was ill-fitting, the sleeves too short, the fabric cheap and shiny. It looked like he had bought it at a thrift store an hour ago. His shoes were scuffed. He held a crumpled hat in his hand. He was thin, so thin that his cheekbones cast sharp shadows on his face. He walked with his head down, his eyes fixed on the carpet, avoiding the gaze of the hundreds of people who knew exactly what he had done. He didn't walk with the swagger of a CEO. CEO anymore. He walked with the hesitation of a stray dog entering a house where it had been kicked before. Tiny, who was standing near the back, took a step forward. I saw his massive hands ball into fists. He was ready to stop him. He was ready to drag him out into the street to protect me from the insult of his presence. I shook my head slightly. Just a small movement. Tiny saw it. He stepped back. He let Marcus pass. The singing faded as the choir finished the verse. The church went silent. The only sound was the soft thud of Marcus's shoes on the carpet. He walked all the way to the front. He stopped 5 feet from me. He stopped 5 feet from the casket. He looked at the flowers. He looked at the wood. His shoulders began to shake. A sound escaped his throat, a broken, jagged sob that echoed in the quiet sanctuary. He looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, swimming in tears. "Dad," he whispered. I looked at him. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound distance, as if I were looking at him through the wrong end of a telescope. He was small. He was far away. He took a step toward me. He looked at the empty space on the front bench, the space next to me, the space for the chief mourner, the space for the husband and the son. He moved to stand beside me. It was an instinct, a muscle memory from a lifetime of being the golden boy, the heir, the center of our world. He thought that in death, all debts were canceled. He thought that grief was a reset button that would allow him to reclaim his place at my right hand. I moved my cane. It wasn't a violent motion. I just lifted it and planted it firmly on the floor, blocking his path. The rubber tip hit the wood with a dull thud. Marcus froze. He looked down at the cane, then up at my face. Confusion and hurt washed over him. "Dad," he whispered again. His voice trembled. I want to sit with you. I want to be with Mom." I looked him in the eye. The church was holding its breath. Every ear was strained to hear what the old lion would say to the cub who had bitten him. I pointed with my chin to the left side of the aisle, the side where the general public sat, the side for acquaintances, distant relatives, and strangers. "Guests stand on the left," I said, my voice low but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "Family stands on the right." Marcus stared at me, his mouth opened slightly. "But Dad, I am family. I am your son. She was my mother. She was your mother when she was alive," I said. "And you slapped her. You chose your side, Mark. You chose it when you raised your hand. You chose it when you let your wife mock her food. You chose it when you sent wolves to my door." I leaned in closer so only he could hear the next part. "You do not get to dishonor her in life and then borrow her dignity in death. You forfeited your seat on this bench." Marcus looked at the empty space next to me. It was the loneliest space in the world. He realized then that I wasn't just punishing, I was erasing him. I was telling the world and God himself that I stood alone. "Please," he choked out, tears streaming down his face. "Everyone is watching. Do not do this to me. I am not doing anything to you," I said. "You did this to yourself. Now go take your seat over there with the guests or turn around and leave. Those are your choices." He stood there for a long, agonizing moment. He looked at the casket one last time. He reached out a hand as if to touch the flowers, but he pulled it back. He knew he wasn't worthy to touch them. He turned slowly. He looked at the sea of faces, people he had known his whole life, people who had watched him grow up. They weren't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with judgment. He crossed the aisle. He walked to the third row on the left side. He squeezed in next to a stranger, a woman I didn't know, who shifted her purse to make room for him. He sat down. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hand. I turned back to the casket. I placed my hand on the polished wood. "I am here, B," I whispered. "I am here." The preacher began his eulogy. He spoke of Beatrice's kindness. He spoke of her strength. He spoke of the medical center that would bear her name. He didn't mention Marcus. It was as if he didn't exist. Throughout the service, I could hear him. I could hear the muffled sounds of his crying from across the aisle. It was the sound of a man mourning not just a death, but a life, his own life. He was mourning the death of his potential, the death of his inheritance, and the death of the love he had thrown away. When the service was over, the pallbearers came forward. Tiny was one of them. So was Dr. Erith. They lifted her gently. I walked behind the casket. I walked alone. As I passed the third row, I didn't look to the left. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the light coming through the open door. We buried her on a hill overlooking the river. It was a beautiful spot under a weeping willow tree. When the casket was lowered, Marcus stood at the very back of the crowd behind the last row of mourners. He stood under the shade of an oak tree apart from everyone. I threw the first handful of dirt. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. People came by to shake my hand, to hug me, to offer their condolences. They surrounded me with warmth. They were my family now, the family of choice. When the crowd finally dispersed and the sun began to set, I was left alone by the grave. I looked up at the hill. Marcus was still there. He was waiting for a sign, waiting for me to wave him over, waiting for me to say that the punishment was over and he could come home. I looked at him. I adjusted my hat. I turned my back on him and walked toward the waiting car. I didn't offer him a ride. I didn't offer him a kind word. He had a long walk back to the city, a long walk back to his basement, a long walk back to the reality he had created. As the car drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was a small black figure against the setting sun, standing over a grave he had helped to dig. "Good night, Beatrice," I said to the empty car. "Rest well, my love. The house is clean, the doors are locked, and no one will ever hurt you again. 5 years is a long time for a man who is waiting to die, but it passes in the blink of an eye for a man who is busy living. The last 5 years of my life were the best I ever had. I did not spend them in boardrooms or on golf courses. I spent them in the garden where Beatrice used to plant her lily. I spent them sitting in the lobby of the rehabilitation center, watching broken people learn to walk again. And I spent them in silence. The silence of a house that was no longer filled with the noise of greed or the chaos of ungrateful children. It was a holy silence. When the end finally came, it was not dramatic. There were no heart monitors beeping frantically, no doctors rushing in with paddles. I was sitting in my favorite armchair looking out at the sunset over the Georgia pine. I felt a heaviness in my chest, a slowing of the rhythm that had kept time for 78 years. I closed my eyes and I saw Beatrice. She was standing in the light wearing that blue dress she loved. She held out her hand. I took it. And just like that, Isaiah Jefferson left this world. But even from the other side, I had one last piece of business to attend to, one last lesson to teach. The reading of the will took place 3 days after my funeral. It was held in the office of Saul Silverstein. The room smelled of old leather and expensive Scotch. Rain was lashing against the windows, a fitting backdrop for the final act of this tragedy. Sitting in the high-backed leather chair was Marcus, my son. He was 43 years old now. The last 5 years had carved deep lines into his face. His hair was graying at the temples. He was not the soft, arrogant boy in the tuxedo anymore. He was a man who had worked. He was a man who had scraped grease off plates and mopped floors. He was wearing a suit, but it was not Italian. It was a simple black suit bought off the rack, likely with money he had saved for months. He sat with his hands clasped tightly in his lap. His knuckles were white. He was nervous. Of course he was nervous. He was human. Despite everything, despite the hard lessons and the cold silence deep down in the secret chamber of his heart, he held on to a tiny flicker of hope. He hoped that death had softened me. He hoped that in my final moments I had remembered the little boy he used to be and forgotten the man he had become. He hoped that there was a trust fund, a hidden account, a safety net that would catch him after his long fall. Saul sat behind the massive mahogany desk. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Marcus over the rim. Saul had aged too. His hand shook slightly as he broke the wax seal on the heavy envelope. He unfolded the document. The paper crinkled in the quiet room. I, Isaiah Jefferson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, Saul read. His voice was dry and emotional. Marcus leaned forward slightly. He held his breath. Saul continued reading the list of bequests. To the Ebenezer Baptist Church, I leave the sum of $5 million for the construction of a new youth center and the maintenance of the community food pantry. Marcus flinched. $5 million. Gone. To the United Steelworkers Pension Fund, Local 409, I leave the sum of $10 million to ensure that no retired worker ever has to choose between medicine and food. Marcus closed his eye. $10 million. Gone. To the Beatrice Jefferson Center for Rehabilitation, I leave the entirety of my real estate portfolio, including the commercial properties in downtown Atlanta and the family estate on Highland Drive. The value of these assets is estimated at $45 million. $45 million. The house, the land, the empire, all of it gone. Marcus let out a soft sound. It was like the air leaving a balloon. He slumped back in his chair. He looked defeated. He thought it was over. He thought I had left him nothing but the air in it. But Saul was not finished. He looked up from the paper. He looked at Marcus with a gaze that was not pitying but curious. There is one final bequest, Saul said. Marcus looked up. His eyes widened. The spark of hope flared again. A final bequest. Maybe cash, maybe stocks, maybe enough to start a business, enough to stop washing dishes. To my son, Marcus Jefferson, Saul read. Marcus sat up straight. I leave my personal effects, specifically the item contained in the box, currently in the possession of the executor. Saul reached into his drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. It was plain, unpolished pine. It looked like something a child would make in shop class. He slid it across the polished desk. Marcus stared at the box. It was too small to hold a deed, too small to hold gold bars. Open it, Marcus, Saul said softly. Marcus reached out. His worker's hands, rough and scarred, trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of simple cotton, was a watch. It was not a Rolex. It was not a Patek Philippe. It was a Timex with a leather strap that had been replaced 3 times. The face was scratched. The metal was worn down on the sides where it had rubbed against my wrist for 40 years. I bought that watch in 1978. It cost me $12. It was the watch I wore when I negotiated the strike of '82. It was the watch I wore when I carried Marcus out of the hospital the day he was born. It was the watch I checked every day at 5 a.m. when I clocked in and every night at 7 p.m. when I clocked out. Marcus lifted the watch from the box. It was ticking, a steady rhythmic sound. Tick, tick, tick. Under the watch was a folded piece of paper, a note. note. Written in my handwriting. Read the note, Saul said. Marcus unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the familiar script. I could see his lips moving as he read the words I had written 2 weeks before I died. Marcus, you are sitting in that chair waiting for a number. You are waiting for a check that will erase the last 5 years of struggle. You are waiting for me to save you one last time. I am not going to save you. I loved you too much to do that. I have given away the money. All of it. Every dime. It has gone to people who will use it to build, to heal, and to protect. It has gone to the world that you tried to set on fire. But I am leaving you this watch. It is not worth anything at the pawn shop. You cannot sell it to pay rent. You cannot trade it for a suit. But it is the most valuable thing I own. This watch measured every hour I worked to put food on your table. It measured every minute I waited for you to come home when you were out spending my money. It measured the seconds of silence after you slapped your mother. I am giving it to you because you finally understand what work is. I saw you in the diner, Marcus. I saw you scrub that table. For the first time in your life, you looked like a Jefferson. But here is the truth, son. This watch does not stop. It keeps moving. It doesn't care if you are rich or poor. It doesn't care if you are sorry or angry. It just counts. You are 43 years old. You have spent half your life building a lie and the last 5 years paying for it. The time you have left is shrinking. Wear this watch. Let it remind you that you cannot buy more time. You can only spend it. Spend it becoming the man your mother believed you were. Spend it being kind. Spend it being honest. Spend it doing a job until it is finished. I leave you no money, Marcus. I leave you the ticking of the clock. Make it count. Dad. Marcus finished reading. He lowered the paper. The room was silent except for the rain and the ticking of the watch in his hand. He didn't scream. He didn't throw the box across the room. He didn't curse my name. He looked at the old scratched watch. He ran his thumb over the worn leather strap. He remembered the smell of machine oil and pipe tobacco that used to cling to it. He remembered sitting on my lap as a child listening to the ticking against my ear. He realized then that I hadn't left him empty-handed. I had left him a compass. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus unbuttoned the cuff of his cheap shirt. He took off the plastic digital watch he had been wearing. He dropped it into the trash can next to the desk. He put on the Timex. He fastened the strap. It was a little loose because his wrists were thinner than mine, but he adjusted it until it fit. He looked at his wrist. The second hand swept around the face, smooth, relentless. He looked up at Saul. "Thank you, Mr. Silverstein," Marcus said. His voice was steady. It was quiet. Saul nodded. "Is there anything else, Marcus?" "No," Marcus said. "That is everything." He stood up. He picked up the box and the note and put them in his pocket. He picked up his hat. He walked to the door. He stopped and looked back at the empty chair where I used to sit. He didn't say goodbye. He just nodded a respectful acknowledgement between two men. He walked out of the office and into the rain. He didn't hail a taxi. He walked to the bus stop. He stood there in the downpour water dripping from the brim of his hat. He looked at the watch on his wrist. It was 3:15. His shift at the diner started at 4. He had 45 minutes. He didn't worry about the millions he had lost. He didn't worry about the mansion on the hill. He worried about being late for work. He stood straight. He checked the time again. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Jefferson was exactly where he was supposed to be. The money was gone. The empire was gone. But the ticking remained. And as the bus pulled up, splashing water onto the curb, Marcus stepped forward to meet it. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. But he was free. Because a man who respects time is a man who owns his life. And that, in the end, was the only inheritance worth having. The rain in Georgia has a rhythm to it. A slow, steady drumming that washes the red clay off the roads and forces the world to slow down. It has been 10 years since I closed my eyes in that armchair. And 5 years since my son Marcus walked out of Saul Silverstein's office with a plastic box and a $12 watch. I am not in the world of the living anymore, but a father never truly leaves his children. We watch from the quiet spaces. We watch from the rustle of the leaves and the stillness of the morning mist. And today, I am watching Marcus. He is 53 years old now. The vanity that once defined him has been eroded by the river of time. His hair is gray-cropped close to his skull, not for style, but for utility. The soft hands that used to hold wine glasses are now calloused and rough, permanently stained with the grease of the kitchen and the oil of the machines he fixes on the weekends. He is not a CEO. He is not a millionaire. He is the night shift manager at Mel's Diner, the same place where I tipped him $100 to clean a table. It is honest work. It is hard work. And for the first time in his life, he is good at it. He is standing on the sidewalk across the street from the Beatrice Jefferson Center for Rehabilitation. He does not have an umbrella. He stands in the rain, letting the water soak into his cheap coat. He comes here every year on the anniversary of my death. He never goes inside. He never tells the receptionist who he is. He never tries to claim the legacy that sits behind those glass doors. He just stands there and bears witness. He looks at the building. It has grown over the years. There are new wings, new gardens, and a playground for children recovering from accidents. It is a beacon of hope for the city. Cars pull up to the valet stand, dropping off grandmothers and veterans people who would have been forgotten by the system if not for the endowment I left. Marcus watches them. He sees a young man helping his father out of a car, adjusting his wheelchair with patience and tenderness. He watches that interaction closely. I see the muscle in his jaw tighten. He is remembering. He lifts his left arm. The sleeve of his coat pulls back, revealing the watch, my watch. The leather strap is darker now, worn by his sweat and his labor. The crystal is scratched from the time he scraped it against a grill, but it is still ticking. It has never stopped. Marcus winds it every morning before he brushes his teeth and every night before he says his prayers. It is the metronome of his life. He looks at the time. It is exactly 3:15, the same time he left the lawyer's office 5 years ago. He looks back at the building and the tears start. They are not the angry tears of a spoiled child who lost his toy. They are not the fearful tears of a criminal who got caught. They are the quiet, devastating tears of a man who finally understands the value of what he threw away. He is not crying because he is poor. He has enough to eat. He has a small apartment that is clean. He has the respect of his crew at the diner. He is crying because he sees his name on the building, Beatrice Jefferson, and he realizes that the distance between him and that name is not measured in miles or money. It is measured in character. He is crying because he remembers the sound of the slap. He remembers the silence of the church. He remembers the look in my eyes when I handed him the money clip. He realizes that he had a kingdom of love and he traded it for a kingdom of dust. He reaches up and touches the cold glass of the watch face. He runs his thumb over it like a worry stone. I am sorry, he whispers into the rain. The words are lost in the traffic noise, but I hear them. I hear them louder than a shout. I am sorry, Mom. I am sorry, Dad. He stands there for a long time until the cold seeps into his bones. Then he takes a deep breath. He wipes his face with his rough hand. He checks the watch again. Time to go. The diner opens in an hour and he cannot be late. The crew is counting on him. The customers are counting on him. The job must be done, and it must be done right. He turns away from the palace he could have ruled. He turns toward the bus stop. He walks with a limp, the arthritis settling into his knees just like it did in mine. He walks with a heavy heart, but he walks with his head up. As I watch him go, I feel a shift in the ether, a lightening of the spirit. Beatrice is beside me. She is smiling. She is not looking at the building. She is looking at him. He is going to be okay, she says softly. Yes, I answer. He is. He is not the son I dreamed of. He is not the titan of industry I wanted him to be, but he is a man. He pays his debt. He keeps his word. He respects the clock. And in the grand calculus of the universe, that is enough. I do not regret what I did. I do not regret the eviction. I do not regret the silence. I do not regret leaving him the watch instead of the fortune. If I had given him the money, it would have killed him. It would have fed the cancer of his greed until there was nothing left of his soul. By taking everything away, I gave him the only chance he had to find himself. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. It broke my heart to break his life. But love is not about making people comfortable. Love is about making them grow, even if you have to burn the forest down to let the new seeds sprout. Marcus gets on the bus. He pays his fare. He sits by the window. He looks at his reflection in the glass. He looks tired. He looks old. But he does not look empty anymore. He is filled with the hard-won wisdom of a man who has lost everything and found the only thing that matters. He has the time, and for the first time he knows how to spend it. I take Beatrice's hand. The scene fades. The rain stops. The world of men continues to spin, driven by ambition and desire and fear. But here in the quiet, there is only peace. The peace of a job finished. The peace of a promise kept. And as the bus disappears into the gray mist of Atlanta, I whisper one last thing to the son who finally learned to tell time. Keep it winding, Marcus. Keep it winding. A parent's love is often compared to an endless ocean, vast and forgiving. But even the ocean has its limits, and when crossed, its waves can be destructive. We spend our lives building castles for our children, hoping they will rule with kindness. Yet when they trade their souls for greed and disrespect, treating sacrifice as servitude, they must learn that the hand that built the castle can also lock the gates. True inheritance isn't gold or real estate, it is character. Without it, you are simply a beggar sitting on a throne of dust. This story of Isaiah and Marcus is a reminder to all of us. It reminds us that gratitude is the rent we pay for the privilege of living. It reminds us that our parents are not resources to be mined, but roots that ground us. And it reminds reminds us that it is never too late to change, but the price of redemption is often everything you thought you wanted. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it resonated with you. I hope it made you think about the people in your life who have sacrificed for you and whether you have thanked them lately. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share these important lessons with more people. And if you are new here, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Isaiah was right to leave Marcus nothing but the watch, or do you think he was too harsh? What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let me know your thoughts down below and tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, from Atlanta to London, from New York to Manila. Let's connect in the comments section. Until next time, remember that the clock is always ticking. Make sure you are spending your time on things that truly matter. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Goodbye for now.